Okay, ladies and gentlemen, please stand. And welcome to the Ordinary Meeting 2018 OM4. And I'd like to ask Councillor Aitken to read the Councillor's statement.
Where is it, Chris? Do you know? Oh, yes, it is. All members of this council pledge to the City of Frankston community to consider every item listed on this evening's agenda based on the individual merits of each item, without bias or prejudice, by maintaining an open mind and disregarding councillors' personal interests so as to avoid any conflict with our public duty. Any councillor having a conflict of interest in an item will make proper prior disclosure to the meeting and will not participate in the debate or vote on the issue.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bolam, could you read the prayer, please?
Almighty God, we ask for your blessing upon this council. Direct and prosper its deliberations to the advancement of your glory and the true welfare of the people of Frankston. Amen.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cunha, could you read the traditional acknowledgement, please?
I certainly will, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor O'Connor. We respectfully acknowledge that we are situated on the traditional land of the Boonwurrung and Bunurong in this special place now known by its European name, Frankston. We recognise the contribution of all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to our community in the past, present and into the future.
Thank you. Please be seated. I'd like to welcome in the gallery tonight the present Citizen of the Year, Hilary Pode. Welcome, Hilary. And also the past President, Ron Gleeson, up in the corner. Welcome along, Ron. Do you want this to, do I do this under presentations? Okay. Okay, we have no presentations to citizens, so we'll go on to the confirmation of the minutes of the previous meeting. Moved Councillor Aitken, seconded. Councillor O'Connor. Do you wish to speak to the motion? No?
No, I don't.
No? No one wishes to speak to it? Okay, all those in favour? Carried unanimously. There are no apologies tonight. Disclosures of interest and declaration of conflicts of interest. I have a conflict of interest in the item, and I'll specify the item, which is the representative to Sasono 12.3, and I will hand the chair over to the Deputy Chair when that item comes up. Are there any other conflicts?
Mr. Mayor, I have a conflict of interest in the confidential item C5, the Chief Executive Officer's Performance Review Outcomes, and I will leave the chamber when the council debates that.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Okay. Hearing of submissions. Do we have any submissions, Mr. Mayor? Mr. CEO?
Through you, Mayor, there are no public question time questions submitted.
Goodness gracious. What's happening here? Okay. I now go on to hearing submissions, but prior to me doing that, I need to make a statement. It will be assumed that any submission which is presented on an incorporated associated letterhead or which claims to be on behalf of the incorporated association has, in fact, been appropriately authorised by the association. Submitters are also advised that their submission and any subsequent discussion will be recorded as part of the meeting. It is not intended that submitters will be visible in the live stream of this meeting. As you can see, we have cameras up now. Cameras are positioned so that members of the public are not visible. Archives of council meetings will be made available to members of the public generally within 3 days of the meeting. If you do not wish to be recorded, please advise me at the commencement of your submission. Members of the public must not operate photographic, audio or video recording equipment or any other recording device at any council meeting without first obtaining consent. Now, I call on the first submitter, Hilary Pode, and I know Hilary already knows there's a maximum speaking time of 3 minutes. I'll give you the nod when you've got 15 seconds to go, Hilary. Welcome, Hilary.
Good evening. While these are being handed about, I'd just like to mention that you said you'd give me the nod. It's very hard to see a nod when you're reading something. And last meeting I did ask for a beep.
I'll give you a beep.
Yeah, the beep turns off the microphone. So
No,
therefore,
I'll just go.
couldn't you just, yeah, a little bell. Yeah,
There you
simple.
go. How's that?
Simple.
Simple.
Yeah, that's,
Trouble is, if I do that, you might come out finding, Hilary.
that's been known before. Good evening. This is a submission from Long Island Residents Group on the amendment C123. Long Island Residents Group wishes to thank the Council for listening to the community regarding the reduction of maximum height limits from 32 metres to 20 metres in the area bounded by Ploughman Place, Cannonook Creek, Beach Street and the Nepean Highway. However, we request that this 20-metre height be made mandatory and not preferred, as the latter alternative does not give adequate protection for this height. The State Government Practice Note 60 identifies exceptional circumstances where mandatory height, and I repeat mandatory, controls can be considered for activity centres, two of which are sensitive coastal environments where exceeding an identified height limit will unreasonably detract from the significance of the coastal environment, and two, significant landscape precincts such as natural waterways. Both of these circumstances apply to Frankston. In fact, Frankston is the only metropolitan activity zone which has a coastal environment. It obviously applies in this instance and to this part of Precinct 1B. We see no acceptable reason why the city's connection to the Cannonook Creek and the coast should be compromised by allowing flexible building heights just because of the preferences of some individual developers. We also request the Council authorises officers to request the Minister for Planning to adopt Frankston Planning Scheme Amendment 123, including mandatory maximum 20-metre height as described above as an interim measure. Up until now, you have shown exceptional attention to community concerns. Your decision tonight will be your legacy for future generations. Please do not follow in the example of previous councils' disastrous decisions, such as the sale of Central Park and the Beach Street car park, which have had such negative impacts on our activity centre. This decision will be historical. Tonight you can vote to minimise the heights of the last remaining connection of the city to the coast for future generations, or you can vote to allow individually preferred height limits for the next 20 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hilary. Is there any... Do we have any questions? No questions? Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Ms. Joanne Kavanagh on behalf of the Frankston Beach Association. I'll do the same as I have done with Hilary, Joanne. I'll just press the bell, okay? You need to press your microphone, the button.
This one? Frankston Beach Association has been a strong advocate for our beach and precious foreshore environment for over 35 years. The final outcome of this current process, including the panel's recommendation, and I quote, to ensure that development along the western and southern boundaries of the sub-precinct 1B responds to the sensitive interface with Cannonook Creek and the surrounding foreshore and established residence area, unquote, which is before councillors tonight, will not celebrate a sensitive interface. The built concept has been pushed as far as it possibly can and shows no sign of sensitivity whatsoever. All our concerns and those of other community groups have fallen on deaf ears. A series of 20-metre buildings with few wind tunnels on a beautiful coastal strip creates a dividing line, stroke disconnection, stroke blocking to the rest of the central business district and to the community at large. FBA submits the Council should adopt the Planning Practice Note 60, the Victorian Government's Guide to the Drafting of Structure Plans for Activity Centres, which clearly states that mandatory limits will be considered in exceptional circumstances which are identified as Hilary said, sensitive coastal environments where exceeding the height limits will unreasonably detract from the significance of coastal environment and significant landscape precincts such as natural waterways. Precinct 1B confronts onto both of these environments. Geelong is the only other designated activity centre with a coastal aspect. Obviously, this Practice Note 60 is directed towards these two activity centres. Geelong has observed this practice and has introduced lower height levels overlooking its waterfront. It shows preferred building heights, Western Beach to be 9 metres and Inner Wedge Precinct a preferred height of 20 metres. Frankston's Amendment C123 has ignored Practice Note 60. FBA recommends under 12 metres for the sensitive interface. And just as an aside, recommends that councillors, before adopting C123, consider the Nightingale projects, inner-city housing developments built for growing populations which adhere to the Nightingale pillars of social, environment and financial sustainability. There are currently 12 projects in active development, and the Nightingale is a visionary concept which develops multi-residential housing in cities which is environmentally sustainable, financially affordable and socially inclusive, which promotes better health and wellbeing outcomes for residents. Let us also be visionary. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Joanne. Before you get up, any questions for Joanne before she leaves the microphone? None? Thank you very much, Joanne. I'd like to call on Graham Dixon, please, to make a submission on application 614-2016P.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councillors. Councillors will recall this item was being deferred and we've made some submissions to council previously. Tonight, I just want to reiterate that we're obviously in agreement with the officer's assessment and we accept all of the conditions that are proposed in relation to that recommendation. Unfortunately, the weather was against us when we endeavoured to simulate the height of the sign, but fortunately we'd taken some video which has been submitted to the council as a result of a trial flight that we had made previously. That confirmed the assessment that we'd previously made, that 25 metres as the height of this sign is required to achieve its purpose of endeavouring to identify the centre from Peninsula Link and to attract business from beyond Frankston's boundaries from the elongated north-south catchment that Peninsula Link provides to the centre. I won't go over old ground, but I'd simply like to draw council's attention to several aspects of the report that's before you. Firstly, I think it is significant that the officers sought independent urban design advice in relation to the sign, and that advice supports this recommendation, finding that from an urban design perspective, the sign was considered appropriate. I think it's also significant that the officers find, and our submissions included, that the sign is supported not only by the council's advertising code, but also policy for advertising signs adjacent to freeways contained within the planning scheme. And I think that is a significant issue. finally, I'd also like to draw councillors' attention to the perceived or the potential amenity impacts that the sign might have had on sensitive areas around the site. And simply put, the separation distances, the changes in the topography of the general area, we believe mean, and I think the report indicates, that those effects would be negligible in terms of the operation of the sign both at day and at night. I'd also like to indicate that the further development of the site, and in particular the application that's currently been lodged with Council for the Stage 1 expansion, will further limit sight lines from those sensitive interfaces to the sign's location.
Thank you
Mr.
very
Mayor.
much, Graham. Obviously, I've got a councillor with his hand up. Councillor Aitken.
I note that you have made a comment that the impact of the sign in terms of local or nearby amenity is negligible. Negligible.
Yes,
You made that comment.
That's our assessment.
How do you assess that to be when it's about 80 feet high?
In responding to council officers' further information request, we actually modelled the height of the sign from what we regarded as the typical viewpoints from the sensitive interfaces, and those are the residential properties that abut the site to the north, the residential properties to the east on the other side of McClellan Drive, and the residential properties to the south of Cranbourne Road. We modelled the views to the sign from each of those locations and found that not only are the views distant, but in fact the views are largely glimpses of the sign due to intervening structures and the intervening topography. Simply put, we don't believe that there are significant views to the sign from those adjacent residential areas, which are between 450 and 200 metres separated from the site of the sign.
Thank you. A very interesting comment you made.
Any other councillors with any questions of Graham? If not, thank you very much, Graham.
Thank you, Mr.
Okay, I'd like to call on Mr. Robert Alsop, who is making an submission on 3 McLean Court, Frankston South. Robert, as per other people, I'll give you a ring on the bell with 20 seconds to go, so allow you to wind up. Thank you. Press your button so I can hear you.
Good evening, Mayor and councillors. Thank you for letting me speak tonight. My name is Robert Alsop. Myself, my family live at 3 McLean Court, Frankston South. We have lived at this address since the 12th of February 2016. We bought in this area due to being a perfect house to fit our family, and there is existing sheds in the area. We thought we could do the same to accommodate our cars. As you are aware, I've put in an application to construct 3 structures of a garage, a shed and alfresco, which have been recommended to grant a permit by the Frankston planning officers. I have been a keen and an avid motor car enthusiast even before I could drive as a young child. Over the years, I've collected a few cars which I've spent a lot of time and money on, which I enjoy. With no shed, garage, these cars are deteriorating in the elements such as mice, rats, spiders, ants' nests, heat, rain, dust, hail, falling branches, and much more. The extent of damage ranges from scratches, rust, interior going mouldy, sagging, falling headlining, colour fading, window tint peeling, plastic parts cracking and warping, just to name a few. I have 6 children, 4 of which have licences. They have supported me. They have supported and been involved in my passion and know how important these cars are to me. My dream would be to pass these vehicles on to my children in years to come when I'm gone or too old to enjoy them and continue my passion. The main concern by the objectors are with the shed, which surprised me, as most neighbours in our neighbouring area to have large sheds and garages. They are concerned with noise, smell, etc. associated with being a workshop. These, I ensure you, will not be the case, as I'm not a mechanic and never have been one. All mechanical repairs are conducted by a qualified mechanic at a proper off-site workshops. The mediation meeting we had, I listened to the objectors and clearly understood their concerns. I wish no ill feelings between me, my family with our neighbours, and have no hidden agendas with these three structures. On saying this, I have offered and agreed to lower the height of the roof, which was another concern, so it's no longer a barn style but a normal gable roof. I have agreed in a clause that no tools will be housed in the shed to conduct any sort of mechanical repairs. Most would be in uproar to agree with this clause, as majority have sheds, stool tools, etc. in their sheds. But as you can see, I am very concerned with the deterioration and safety of my vehicles and have agreed with this. This clause is not only for me, but for anyone at this address for the lifetime of the property. The lengthy process to obtain a permit of nearly 2 years have put a lot of stress, financial and emotional, not only but to my wife, my children, family and friends. Mayor and councillors, please take my application with much consideration, as this is very important to me and my family.
Thank you very much, Robert. We have questions, Robert, for you from Councillor Toms.
Hi, Robert. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Welcome. The thing that I would like to ask you, a lot of your fellow neighbours are concerned that the shed, the barn, will be used for commercial practices. Now, you've assured us just now that it's not going to be.
Yes, not going to be.
Would you be happy if a condition be placed on the permit to restrict it for domestic purposes
Certainly.
only?
Yes,
Because that allows for. Sorry, councillor.
I was having a conversation with the manager of town meeting.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. It's all right. So you'd be happy for that to
yeah,
be
just
placed?
I just want the shed somewhere so my cars can be safe. I'm not going to be working on them.
That's understandable.
Yeah, just a storage.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Has any other councillors got any questions? Councillor Aiken.
So, what you're saying is you want a large shed for the storage of the vehicles that currently are not stored.
Correct.
Okay. And you're saying that the shed won't be used for any other
No. No.
activity or purpose?
No.
You're also saying that you won't carry out any repairs or panel beating or any spray painting
No.
or anything like that
Nothing like
on
that,
those
no,
vehicles
no.
in that shed?
I have people to do that for me.
And and that would be off-site?
Correct.
And you understand that with the permit conditions as they're laid out, that was all taken into account?
Yes, I do.
That is all taken into account. You do understand that that you could be subject to sudden visitation by an officer of council if there was any concern, that had been expressed by anyone locally as to anything going on there that's contrary.
Yep.
And you understand all of those
Understand all
points?
that, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors got any questions? If not, Robert, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to call on Peter Mills to give a submission on the same 3 McLean Court, Frankston South. Robert, Peter, you have 3 minutes. I'll let you know 20 seconds before your 3 minutes is up. I'll ring the bell.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. We have nothing against Rob, but there's 8 objections being put in for this place, and there's things that people need to realise when they do make a decision. First of all, Rob did move in with his family. That used to be a lovely bush block with many trees and vegetation. Since Rob's moved in, all those trees have been cleared, and the land where he wants his barn shed, which is a big barn that should be on 3 acres, not on a 2,500 metre square property in Frankston South. It was cleared, it was levelled. We have proof where he's actually advertised for earth moving equipment, a backhoe to come in and do that, so he could put a concrete foundation there. He has extended the gravel driveway by clearing more vegetation to our property. We're at the back of him, and the driveway snakes around our fence where it will go into this barn with 3 doors that are facing directly onto our property and to the property at number 2 Cassinia. We have concerns there with lights and noise. We already hear his cars. We don't know how many cars he's got. We had a meeting with the planners and they could not tell us how many cars he did actually have. He assured us that he doesn't drive a lot of them. We know that he does race at least one of them, and we have observed him driving around the neighbourhood in these cars. He's a shift worker, so he uses his cars at different times of the night. Not only have these trees been cleared, but he also wants to put an alfresco on this property, which is going to be right next to this barn shed, this big barn shed. It's not going to be near his property. Once again, it's going to be near the back fence of the neighbours, where all the noise is going to be. I asked the question, why would you put an alfresco linked to a barn shed, unless you're looking at entertaining while you're working on your cars? Maybe a car club or people around just observing the cars. It doesn't make any sense when you've got a pool area and a balcony. The three things that he's proposing, the garage, we don't have an issue with that. We're happy because that is the size of the other sheds in the neighbourhood. The big barn one, where he wants to put all these classical cars, it's a big barn shed. That's any way you can describe it. There's nothing in the neighbourhood like that. And he's going to put that where he's actually cleared the trees and levelled everything. So we have great concerns with that. There's no consideration for the neighbours. It's one man's hobby that's upsetting the rest of the neighbourhood. It doesn't benefit anyone except for Rob. And we just encourage you to really just, if you can please, just to reject this, because there's a lot of people are not happy. Just quickly, Amanda and David over here, I stood on their back step yesterday. This barn is literally 20 metres away, staring them in the face when they look out their back window. They had bush and trees and vegetation there when the Allsops moved in. That is gone now. So thank you for listening to us.
Okay, Peter, thank you very much. Before you get up, I've got some councillors who have got questions. I've got Councillor Toms and then Councillor Aiken.
Hi.
And then Councillor Cunio.
How you going?
Hi, good, thank you.
Peter. The question is, when do you allege that the vegetation was removed? You've just said that it's been removed by the current occupants who wish to further develop the site. I've got some site images here of various stages of that property, and when there was vegetation and when there wasn't. When do you allege?
Yeah,
when?
The
When
place
it
was
removed?
purchased in February of 2016, and it would have been in the few months after that. It's been a gradual process. We observed tree lobbers that came on. The neighbours did see that, and there was on social media too. We actually advertised for land moving equipment, backhoe, so he could clear land as well. That clearing of vegetation has been going on constantly for 2 years, but there was one time when a lot of trees were cleared. Now, we could not see Amanda and David's because of all the trees. We can clearly see their property now. I've got photos to prove it. Before, we didn't even know their place was there. We could not see it.
Okay, thank you. Hold on, Councillor, I go across to Councillor Aiken and then I come back to you after Councillor Cunio. Councillor Aiken, do you want to...
Yeah, all right. Well, now, it's very hard for us here tonight to make a decision, I think, on this, because we've got two very different sides of an issue. And I personally am having a bit of trouble with this one. So, there's cars on location.
There's a lot of cars.
Yeah. Do you?
It's not a car yard.
No. Do you hear a lot of noise?
We do. The neighbours are woken up.
Yep.
They've always said they've heard these cars idling at night time.
Yep. At what times, for instance, are people woken up?
11 o'clock. At what time do you guys? Yeah. But we've got a lot of people that couldn't make it tonight because of Easter with the late notice as well.
Yes, yeah, that's all right. So, I guess it's fair to say that any car could idle in any suburban location anywhere in Frankston. So what is, I'm not being provocative, I'm just asking, what is the difference here?
The difference here is that if you have a look at the plan there, which, can we get the plan up? Is there any chance of...
I don't think so.
No. As you can see from here, if you've got a barn shed, I mean, this is the barn shed that we're talking about. So it's 3 doors. Now, normally if you're going to have a shed, you'd have it facing to the front of the property. The driveway has been extended to the rear of the property, snakes around the back fence, and then it turns around on a 180 degree turn, so that if he's driving his cars, he'll drive his cars into the 3 doors. Those 3 doors there. Those 3 doors are facing our property. Not the front of the place, not his place, towards our place. These cars are going to drive straight down there on our back fence line with their lights, their noise, and then he's going to turn and park all his cars in his shed. And that shed is facing directly towards our back property. Like I said, the other garage that he wants, we don't have an issue with that. And we have to realise all of these 3 are outside the building envelope, Agreement 173. None of them are within the building envelope. They're all outside of
Okay,
it.
thank you, Peter. You're actually getting into debate here. Yeah, okay. Councillor Cunial?
Thanks very much, Mr Mayor. Ian. You're Ian.
I'm Peter. Yeah,
Peter.
Ian
Oh,
couldn't-
Peter Mills,
yeah,
sorry.
Ian wanted
I
to
just
be
had
here,
a-
but he couldn't.
Thanks, Peter. I just had a quick question for you. You indicated in your submission that this proposed barn-style shed was going to be 20 metres away from one of the neighbours' back windows. And I'm just trying to work out how that can be.
Well, I've got a photo, and honestly, I mean, I've sent it to some of the councillors, I think, and you would be disgusted if you saw it. Councillor Toms has seen it. He'll back me up on that.
Peter, I'm just asking where you got the 20 metres from, because I'm looking at this document here, which shows the shed being built about, it looks like about 13 metres from the property boundary, which would mean on the other side of the property boundary that the property that you say is 20 metres away would need to be within 7 metres. So I'm just asking for clarification, that's all.
20 metres, yeah.
Sorry,
For McLean, not our
you
places.
can't
Yeah.
enter debate, okay?
Yeah. That's for McLean Court, which is Amanda and David's. And so that would be the back of this barn shed, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I thought it was Cassinia
Sorry.
Place, but
Yeah.
now it makes sense. Thank you for answering that.
Okay, Councillor Toms, you had another question?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. My question was, are you aware that the applicant has reduced the height of the barn about the size of this door to the chamber here from that height to lowering it so that it's not going to be as high?
We are aware of that, yes, but it's still a barn shed, and it's still facing directly into the neighbour's back property, not towards his property, but facing towards us. All his cars, if he has his doors open doing anything, all that noise, lights, pollution, whatever, comes straight out onto our property and the property of number 2 Cassinia. And at the end of the day, that vegetation was cleared. Google Earth shows that. It was cleared. Yeah.
Okay,
I have a
councillors.
second question, Mr Mayor, and the question's to Mr Papagiorgio.
Okay.
And the question,
You can't.
I can't right now.
Yeah, you'd have to do that in
I will
debate.
in debate then.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Okay, Peter, thank you very much for that.
Thank you, councillors.
Okay, now I call on Ian McNeil on the same matter, 3 McLean Court, Frankston South. Oh, you can, if you're speaking on behalf of him, you can. You've got 3 minutes, and I will be letting you know 20 seconds before time.
Thank you. Just before I can start talking, it took me 4 minutes, so should I read really fast?
You will only have 3 minutes.
Okay. I'm reading on behalf of the McNeil family because both of our rear properties join where the barn shed is. My wife Susan and I are deeply concerned, as detailed in our original objection. Largely, we are worried that the noise and lack of privacy from the proposed 6-car barn shed and adjacent alfresco area will impact on our tranquil property. The area has already been cleared by the current owners, which they deny, and now their argument is that this area has been cleared, therefore they should be allowed to develop it. How can this be the case? They were fined for removing trees and excavating outside of their building envelope, and now their proposal says that there is no environmental impact. There has already been significant environmental impact, and I believe the course of action should be that the council mandate the restoration of the treed area and to not allow them to turn it into a completely and outrageously oversized development, which is way out of character with this part of Frankston South. We pay a lot of money to live in this area, both in property prices and council rates, and it is a reasonable expectation that bylaws exist to maintain the area and that the council will uphold them. We previously felt that the Frankston Council rigorously defends the treed area in which we live by enforcing rules around tree removal, particularly outside of defined building envelopes, but the Town Planning Department decision to recommend this proposal seems to contradict all of its own rules. What is Council's new position on tree removal and neighbourhood character if it has changed from what it is published on your website? By allowing this proposal, it will set a very dangerous precedent. That is, developments like this are not allowed when there are trees in the way, but it's okay to illegally remove the trees and then get the green light to proceed. The private town planner employed by the owners of 3 McLean Court have compared neighbouring sheds and properties to the 3 McLean Court proposal. However, there are clear errors with what they have presented. Some weren't even sheds. Also, they failed to acknowledge one major factor. 3 McLean Court are wanting 3 outbuildings, all outside the current already once extended building envelope. Please refer to any aerial photograph and note that not one other property in the area has more than 1 outbuilding. This is so far beyond the 100 metres squared area allowed for the outbuildings that it should be rejected. From our point of view, we don't have an issue with the proposed double garage up near the house. Our issue is with the alfresco and the barn shed, both mainly from a noise and privacy point of view, as detailed in our original objection. The only purpose that we can see for an alfresco area for more than 15 metres from the main residence, but adjacent to the barn shed, is for the owners to hold noisy parties while working on cars, which they even admit to in the original proposal. As it stands, we often hear the owner at 4 McLean Court starting and extensively idling his loud cars, sometimes during the night due to his shift work. We would be happy if the whole proposal was reduced to a single outbuilding in line with all the other houses in the area, but would be happy for this to be increased to a 4-size car garage.
Okay, thank you very
near the
much.
house.
Before going any further, we need to get your name. And
Amanda Grills.
Amanda Grills.
Yes.
Amanda, you're speaking on behalf of someone. Someone wants to ask a question, but I don't think really you can answer on behalf of somebody else.
Well,
If you're speaking after this, and you are, I'll let the councillors ask you questions direct.
sorry,
you
there
c-
must have been a
No.
miscommunication.
Well, we've got you down as the next speaker.
Yes, I was going to read this. Ian
Right.
McNeil isn't able to come tonight,
Oh, okay.
so he asked me to read this on his behalf, and I said, well, mine's pretty much the same. Rather than doubling up, am I able to just read this one?
Well, I was going to give you time to read to do your own submission.
Oh, well, I could read the last of it
Yeah, well, you
in my own time.
well, you can give you're down to be speaking, Amanda. So you'll have an opportunity to speak on your behalf now.
Okay,
Okay, you've now got 3 minutes.
okay. As I was saying, we would be happy if the whole proposal was reduced to a single outbuilding in line with all the other houses in the area, but would be happy for this to be increased in size to a 4-car garage up near the house facing McLean Court. It appears from plain view that there is ample room in this area to house 4 cars. If the proposal was modified as such, we would be happy for that, as long as they were forced to remove the new gravel driveway along our fence line and the large gravel cleared area which is way outside the building envelope, both of which they have already constructed illegally. Okay, now that I've got some time, I can also say that my house was the one that Peter was talking about at number 4 McLean Court. And so while we're not in the master room just yet, that's our proposed master room, and I'd say it'd be less than 20 metres away from the barn shed. And when we built our house, we had a strict building envelope, so we weren't able to put our doors out where we wanted them, so our doors opened out to the side. And so we've designed our area around that. And now when we open our big glass doors, we will just see the wall of the shed, the back wall of the proposed shed, which is, it's just going to be horrible, a horrible look from our side of the house. I'm happy to answer any questions.
No worries. Councillor Toms, you have an opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It was me who encouraged you to read for your neighbour this evening.
Thank you.
I've been approached by various neighbours. I would have to say I agree with Councillor Atkin, this is very difficult. I am inclined to move a deferral of this matter would the neighbours be agreeable
Councillor,
to that?
Councillor,
Must-
you're not
The
allowed to
question, that's the
answer.
question.
You've got to ask a question,
That's the
okay?
question with
That
the
wasn't
neighbours.
that wasn't a question.
Would
okay?
you be agreeable to a deferral? That's the question, Mr. Mayor.
Are we able to have a meeting with councillors or?
That's what I'm
Just
proposing.
Okay.
No, you can't speak. Just answer the question, Amanda, will you please?
Yes, as long as we're able to have a meeting with the
Okay.
councillors.
Thanks very
Okay.
much.
If I
Uh,
can, oh, sorry.
That's. Any other councillors got questions of Amanda?
Please say yes.
I think you've put your objections and Mr. McNeil's very well, Amanda. Thanks very much for that. Thank you.
Can I just ask that when we're thinking of this, can you please think, whilst Rob may not do any of the stuff that, you know, he said that he's not going to do, that's fine, but what if he sells in 2 years and someone
Okay.
comes in and says,
All right, Amanda.
"Fantastic."
You've had
you.
enough time. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'd like to call on Roland Abrahams on behalf of Southern Planning Consultants. This is to do with 21 Edward Street, Langwarrin. You have 3 minutes, Roland, and I'll let you know 15 seconds before your time's up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, councillors. Look, I appear on behalf of the applicant in this proposal, but one of the concerns I have is that I do support the officer's report in its completion. However, there are some concerns that I need to draw councillors' attention to, and if I can guide councillors to page 237 of the agenda item, and in particular condition 1C, E, F and G. Now the concerns we have as the consultant for the applicant is that the particular retention of the tree has been recommended by the council officers. However, there is an arborist report that recommends removal, and that certainly affects the proposal as its entirety. There is an easement that runs through the site, which, as you can see from the plans which you have before you, that runs diagonally across, which would affect that site. The fact that there is a tree there, that certainly affects the easement moving forward. There is a report, as I reiterate, that has been provided by a qualified arborist that suggests removal. I would be mindful if council is of the view that if the tree was to be removed, we would be proposing that we would be prepared to provide another tree in its replacement, given that that tree will be removed. But obviously, when you consider the condition 1C and E, that certainly affects the central driveway and the visitors' car space, which is something we want to make sure we retain, given that's formed part of council's policy in the past. Further to that, we've got F and G, which again is condition 1. There is a setback of 1.2 metres minimum from the shared boundary. Now, as councillors may be all aware, there's obviously a number of developments throughout the city of Frankston where these particular setbacks are shared and the actual construction of garages are built onto the boundary. Or, as I would suggest, that the proposal that we're putting forward before the chamber is that this particular development, there would be a fence going right through. So you wouldn't get a wall of brick, it would be a fence, and then you'd have the garage with a slight setback. So I do urge councillors to consider the deletion of F. In relation to G, which is resident 3, which is to the far north or northwest of the proposal, any suggestion of a reduction of 500 millimetres, now that may seem very minuscule in the scheme of things, but the actual bedrooms in their sizes are sitting in the vicinity of just in excess of 3 metres. So any consideration of that would look at potentially exceeding onto the garage, which would certainly provide a shear wall, which is certainly not in the favour of planning officers.
Thank you,
let alone
Roland. Your
councillors.
time is up.
Thank you.
Have I got any councillors with any question? Councillor Mayer.
Yep, hi.
Good evening,
We
councillor.
received an email, I wasn't able to attend the residents' meeting and I apologise to the residents for that. But there was a suggestion that the 3 two-storey buildings be relocated to the front of the property, and there was a feeling that that wasn't really taken seriously, and I'm just wondering if that would be possible.
Councillor Mayor, I can assure you that all consideration was taken into account in relation to redesigning. The problem we have is we've got an easement that runs through the site, and obviously with easements there are certain guidelines that need to be met, that we need to follow procedurally, and that's from Melbourne Water, and obviously from a town planning perspective this is probably the best layout that we've come up with. We're certainly not suggesting that we want to make this an overdeveloped site. This is a site that has made sure that it complied with town planning guidelines, and that is certainly clear by the officer's recommendation. And as I said earlier in my submission, the changes that I'm requesting are very slight. It certainly adheres to the entirety of the report, with the exception of those 4 conditions that I'm requesting deletion of.
Thank you very much, Robert. I've got one more question, then go to Glenn, Councillor Glenn Aiken, and then to Councillor Brian Cunill.
So if you're looking at replacing, I'm just wondering, is the footprint different for the front ones than it is for the back ones? Because you don't build over an easement anyway. So the other ones at the front would not be over an easement anyway. So that's not a reason not to build them, not to put them there. That's not a good argument. An easement is an easement. You don't build over an easement.
You need a question, Councillor.
It is a question. I'm just saying, I don't really feel that my question's been answered, because if you're building on the same footprint, but you're just changing it from a 2-storey to 1-storey.
Councillor, I understand what you're
But
saying.
the easement is not a reason not to swap
Well, you need to
them.
bring this up under discussion when it comes up. He obviously hasn't answered your question, so you need to debate this.
Okay.
Councillor Aiken.
You are well aware of the residents' concerns, aren't you?
I am, Councillor. That is correct.
Good. I would have thought it was reasonable to give consideration to their requests insofar as looking at the site in a malleable way, a flexible way, a plasticine way.
Councillor, you
what
need
I'm
to
asking.
ask a direct question.
This is what I am asking, Mr.
No,
Mayor.
you're not. Councillor, you're not asking a direct question.
Well, I can't answer I
No,
can't
you-
ask a direct question
well,
while you're talking,
you
Mr.
put
Mayor.
it, you put it in a way which is direct, not going into debate. Ask the question directly to him.
Oh, it will be. Why haven't you been able to come up with a concept that reasonably satisfies the concerns of residents, given that it's the same parcel of land? Why can it truly not be reconfigured?
Councillor, to answer that question, again, the same response I gave to your fellow colleague. The design has met all the town planning regulations. It's met all the requirements. We've ensured that design does reflect the concerns of the residents, and in relation to things such as bulking, visual massing, all of those issues have been addressed. We've ensured that there is proper screening, which is reflective in the officer's report, which highlights those issues. We've also ensured that we've added a visitors car park, which addresses those issues of traffic, which has been a concern by the residents, which we've again, in the previous application that we had lodged, that was not there. And we've added that on there to make sure that the reduction of traffic will take into account, if there are people visiting the site, then it will take that into account. We've also ensured that there'll be tree plantations that will be taking place, which is a condition of the permit, which is also in the report by the council officers.
So you've just said that you've answered the concerns of the residents?
We have answered the concerns of the residents accordingly and fairly, but making sure that, and sorry, Councillor, with due respect, if I may, but also ensuring that we also take into account that it is compliant with the planning provisions and planning controls.
You're finished?
Yes, I am, Councillor.
Good. So why are the residents still objecting?
Well, Councillor, I can't answer that. It's like with any particular application. You'll get actual residents who will object, as per the previous application that's before your chamber to be decided on. You will get councillors who will need to be making a decision, followed by the residents who will make their submissions, followed by the applicant, in which I'm acting on their behalf.
So are you
Okay.
actually saying that there is no way known that the building's design or the layout of the buildings on that site, there's no way known it can be reconfigured? No way known. Is that what you're saying?
No, councillor, you're putting words into my mouth.
I'm just asking you.
Well, I'm answering the question. That's not correct. You're giving me hypotheticals. You're expecting me to
Well,
give you
he's
a
asked.
hypothetical answer.
Can
and
I just
can't answer that.
butt in here?
Sure.
He's actually asking you a direct question,
Sure.
and I'd like you to answer it directly, if you wouldn't mind.
I'm happy to answer the question, but the facts of the matter is, the way this has been designed, it has been designed to take into account the planning controls, and we've made sure that we have taken into account the residents' concerns. There are conditions here which take into account, as you said, councillor, with respect to, and if you have read the documentation, which I'm sure you have, taking into account things such as overlooking, things such as visual bulk, and we've made sure we've taken that into account, given the residents' concerns.
I think he's gone round the.
I think I don't need to ask any further questions.
I don't think you need to. Councillor Cunio.
Thanks very much, Mr Mayor. Hi,
How are you, councillor?
Hi, good, thanks. Good. I'm just, during your submission, you requested the council consider removing Part 1C and E of the officer's recommendations. Part 1C refers to the retention of tree number 2, which is an Eucalyptus alata, and 1E talks about the reconfiguration of the central driveway. My question is, I haven't seen the tree, but there's an aerial shot on page 245 of the council's report. Can you actually achieve this development and retain the tree where it is and just move the driveway and the parking visitor space?
Councillor, we have considered that option, and I've actually gone and seen that tree. Ideally, it would be great if we could retain that tree, but unfortunately, the way it's been designed, it would create further problems. The only option we would have is to move the visitor space. Instead of it sitting on the eastern side, it would move to the western side. But obviously, that would not, in my opinion, create a good development site, because we've now got a visitors car park that's directly opposite resident 1. And so the reason why we've put a permeable visitor space is to allow for any future trees if we were to put there. So we're asking for the tree to be removed, because that is what's been recommended by the arborist. This is not something that we've come up with.
Roland, you're getting worse than the councillors. You are getting worse than the councillors. You've just been asked a question and then you start going into debate. I want you to answer the questions directly if you're asked a question, please. Councillor Cunha, any more questions?
No, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Any councillors wish to add to the debate? Thank you very much, Roland.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, councillors.
Okay, Miss Angela Glenn, the same application, 21 Edward Street. Oh, God. Angela, you have the same direction as previous speakers. You have 3 minutes, and I shall let you know with the ring of the bell when you're 20 seconds to go.
Thank you. Hello, Mr Mayor, councillors. My name is Angela Glenn, and my husband Jeff and I live on a battle axe property at the rear of number 21 Edward Street, which is the development in question. I haven't spoken at a council meeting before and I'm a bit nervous, so I hope you'll excuse me if I get a bit flustered. I'll be speaking on behalf of Jeff and myself, as well as the other 3 adjoining property owners. After our neighbourhood meetings, we realised that basically we were all on the same page. We all wanted the same sort of outcome. So rather than all speaking and going over the same ground, we thought we'd limit our submissions to just a couple of us. Firstly, I would like to say that we are not, and never have been, opposed to the redevelopment of this site. Happy, the original owner, always talked about how, you know, he'd sell the property one day and make his millions, and so it was no surprise to us when he finally did sell. As to the proposed application, as far as the building and council requirements go, I'm sure that this proposal ticks most boxes. However, from our sides of the fence, we don't agree. I know you're all familiar with the site plans, but not in relation to our neighbouring properties. So I've drawn up a basic diagram for your consideration. I'm sorry, it's a bit amateurish, but it shows the impact on all of us from the current placement of the two-storey dwelling. So this is Gary and Marilyn at the front here. This is Steve and Michelle. This is my husband and I, and this is our new neighbours, Lauren and Dylan. So you can see that the placement of these three double-storey buildings, dwellings, completely is going to completely change the height, and the placement will dominate and invade our feeling of personal amenity due to their incredibly close proximity, as well as creating what we all feel is an unacceptable visual bulk. The building application states repeatedly, and I quote, "The proposal will not unreasonably impact on the amenity of the surrounding neighbourhood character, as its siting and location has been carefully chosen to result in the least amount of impact on adjoining properties, and I quote, will not be visibly obtrusive or suffer from visual bulk." Well, from our point of view, they do, and they will achieve exactly the opposite to those statements. The two-storey dwellings positioned as they are will be completely out of character for us adjoining neighbours. They'll result in us losing our natural and reasonable openness and personal amenity, which is absolutely the key reason that we all chose to live there. They haven't seemed to show any consideration or compromise when we talked about perhaps finding a solution and putting the 2 stories down the front. In effect, they wanted 100% their way. We're jointly asking, all we're jointly asking for is a reasonable degree of consideration
Thank you,
that is
Angela.
fair to all of us.
Your time's up. Okay, any questions from any of the councillors? For a first time, Angela, you put it very, very well.
Thank you.
Okay, I call on now Michelle Aberwhite for the same proposal, 21 Edward Street, Langwarrin.
Thank you, Mayor and councillors, for allowing me to speak. Yes, my husband and I, Steve and I, live at number 23 Edward Street. We are a Battle Axe block, so we are right down the block. And the 2-storey developments, the visual bulk that we get to look at outside our front door is terrible. It's totally changing the environment of Langwarrin. It's always been known as leafy Langwarrin. It's, sort of becoming a concrete jungle. And we get no say in the matter. We've lived there for over 20 years, and all of a sudden developers come in, make a quick buck and leave. And we get left with a concrete jungle. This density, should be left to central areas, like as in Frankston, main areas, instead of destroying, the outside part. I don't think it's sort of, we don't get much say in how the planning's done. It's just totally changing it. And it's just always been known as one of the best streets in Langwarrin forever. It's so, has all the gum trees, we don't have footpaths, we want to keep it natural as possible. But now, it's starting to get destroyed. And that's, we just feel we're being overrun by high density, and the visual bulk and the shadows that overcast will come across to our property, So we feel that will encroach by sort of some 0.9 metres, where it's gone by the formula that was calculated on the 22nd of September. So, our personal space is being invaded. So that's it.
Thank you very much. You have got extra time, but if you want to...
No,
okay, we'll get councillors to ask you some questions. Councillor Aitken.
So you currently love where you live?
Exactly, yes.
And you feel that this is going to, how you really feel this is going to impact on your lifestyle and your outlook into the future?
Yes, it does already, because of developments that have already started and has changed the character of our street completely. And it's just out of control, like there's all cars on the street, and the road is not wide enough for parking on both sides anyway, and now we've got little chicanes happening, and little bump, little rollovers happening, changing the whole aspect of the site. It's totally changed dramatically.
And how long have you lived there, you say, sorry?
We have lived there 22 years in Edward Street. But
yeah.
I've lived in Langwarrin all my life, so, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Sandra Mayer.
Hi, how are you?
Thank you.
So I'm just wondering from memory, I think Colin and I have walked those streets a number of times. It's one of those ones that are really narrow with no footpath and you have to walk on the nature strip. So it means that it makes it very difficult for someone with a pram. I think we actually had a resident who put in about 300 complaints or something about, you know, the problem because there's no footpaths there. You probably know the person, but yeah, so people have to park on the nature strips, which means it's very hard to walk around the cars.
Sandra, you need to ask a question.
I was just asking, is that one of those streets that has no footpaths and is very narrow? And you said yes. Thank you. Yeah.
No more questions? Okay, well, thank you very much, Michelle.
Thank you.
You've done well.
Thank you very much.
Okay, councillors, now on to items brought forward. Does any items that councillor wish to bring forward?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, there is an item that I wish to bring forward, and that you have flagged an item, I think, to do with the FDBA in a closed council. I would like that, brought into open council.
Well, you need a seconder to do that. Now that's procedural, isn't it? Yes, procedural. Okay, that's a procedural motion, and what we need to do is we need to take a vote on this. So, all in favour of bringing that item in closed council out into open council, please show your hands. Councillor Aitken, Councillor Bolam, Councillor Toms, Councillor McCormick. Those against? Councillor Hampton, Councillor O'Connor, Councillor Cunial, Councillor Sandra Mayer, Councillor Michael O'Reilly. That's lost. Okay, any other items brought forward?
I don't think so.
Just hang on. You want?
Oh, thanks. Mr. Mayor, I was going to suggest that we bring forward all those items that we've had submitters on, but it looks like items 11, 1, 2, 3 and 4 are the ones that in question, so there's probably no real need.
I think we have item 13.2, which is a visitor information centre. We have some people in the gallery
I'll
for that.
move that then, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
That,
So we'll
items-
go as per the schedule, but to bring 13.2 forward. Is that okay with councillors?
I'll so move, Mr. Mayor, if you
Okay.
wish.
No, I don't think it needs a movement, does it? Items brought forward. Yeah, I'll bring them forward. So what we'll deal with 13.2 first, and then we'll go through the agenda as it stands. Okay, we're going to item number 13.2, which is. Oh, hang on. Before we go to that, we got presentations and awards, and also petitions and joint letters. So, do I have any? I know we've got a joint letter from Councillor Cunial.
Do you want me to raise it now, Mr.
Yes,
Mayor?
yes.
I thought you had an award. So, all right.
No,
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to. I'll let you know earlier that there would be a joint letter that I would be tabling tonight. I'll just read briefly the contents of it so that councillors are aware of the gist of it. And it relates to footpaths and associated works in Overport Road, Frankston South. It's fairly lengthy, but I'll read just the main parts of it. We, the undersigned residents, wish to bring to your attention a recent notice to property owners or occupiers from Frankston City Council dated 23rd of March 2018, and there is a copy attached to the joint letter, that approved works for the construction of a footpath between number 68 and number 86 on the western side of Overport Road are underway and due to be completed before the end of the financial year. Additional works include site-specific alterations to curbs for ramp constructions and access ways to Overport Road and a median refuge strip in Overport Road in the vicinity of Vasey RSL Care. Mr Mayor, as I said, it's quite lengthy. The crux of it, if you like, is that there are a number of residents. There's actually 37 signatories to this joint letter, but there are many others, I'm told, who aren't able to sign or weren't able to sign because they were away for Easter. And they're opposed to the building of this footpath. One of the main reasons, it would appear to me, is that because they were never asked whether they wanted a footpath or not. As I indicated, this joint letter suggests that there's quite a number of people opposed to the footpath, and I would like to table this. We've had discussions earlier prior to this meeting, and there's been a agreement that work will stop now until residents are appropriately surveyed.
Thank you, Councillor.
And I'll table that joint letter.
Okay, table that. Okay, councillors and ladies and gentlemen, I have the great pleasure of actually warding a letter under seal to a long-serving member of this council. His name is Michael Craighead, who is sat over to my left over here. This letter under seal, Frankston City Council expresses our sincere gratefulness and appreciation for your contribution and outstanding service to the City of Frankston for the number of 40 years. Michael has been a servant of this council for 40 years, and what an achievement. I think we should put our hands together for Michael. In 1987, you commenced in the role of Junior Administrative Officer of the Rates Office, and after 2 years, you moved on to various appointments within the corporate services sector until 1995, when you were appointed as the Governance Services Coordinator, which you held for 10 years. Michael, I could go on with the different positions that you've held in council. You are a highly regarded and respected leader within this organisation and the wider community. Most people at council know you as the walking encyclopedia, which you are. Due to your extensive knowledge about the municipality, you have always been supportive of your staff, and people value your input, advice and respect your honesty. You are very forthright in what you say, Michael, and it's a characteristic which is not often in people which you meet in your day-to-day life. You are forthright in what you say, and you stick to it. And I'd like to say well done and congratulations, and I'd like to hand over to the Chief Executive Officer to say a few words on behalf of him and the staff.
Thank you, Mr Mayor and councillors. This is a great pleasure that I speak on behalf of the organisation at Frankston City Council on the achievement of Michael Craighead, 40 years service. And I do so on behalf of the staff that Michael would have started out with, and over the passage of time, people have come and gone, new faces, but Michael has remained a constant over 40 years. When I talk to younger members of the staff in this day and age, some people, younger people, both in organisations such as Frankston and in life in general, after about 40 minutes are looking for a new opportunity. And I think it's a testament to Michael's character, to his determination, but more importantly, I think his love of Frankston City Council, and more importantly, the municipality that he serves, that keeps Michael going. And I'd have to say, I didn't know Michael 40 years ago, but today he demonstrates the same level of enthusiasm day in, day out. Yes, he's fearless and frank in his advice to councillors and to CEOs. He backs his judgment. We seek his advice and guidance, and I think that he has served the council and the community tremendously over the 40 years. Unfortunately, he's a Collingwood supporter, but we won't hold that against him. He is a part of the fabric of the organisation, an important part of the fabric. People do look to him for advice, but more importantly, he's a good friend to every individual staff member. And Michael, on behalf of staff past, present, and possibly into the future, because you continue to serve this council, I congratulate you, I thank you, and I say a job well done on behalf of the council and the community.
It's certainly a long time to belong to any organisation, especially a council. So good, well done, Michael. Okay, we'll go on to items brought forward. 13.2.
I'll move.
I'll second, Mr Mayor.
Moved by Councillor Mayer. If I just wait till I get to the 37. Moved Councillor Mayer and seconded Councillor Thoms, wasn't it? Yeah, okay. Okay, Councillor Mayer, do you wish to speak to this?
I'll be brief, yes. So I just want to congratulate all of the people who lobbied us to reverse this decision. Everyone that signed the petition, the people that picked up the phone and had a chat with us, the people that attended the meeting. I'm sorry, again, I wasn't there. I work now. But I think it's a really great outcome. At the time that we originally made the decision, it was in closed council. We didn't have the luxury of being able to go and speak to the volunteers and going, what do you think about this? We couldn't consult, it was confidential. So, you know, it's unfortunate the way that it happened, but it didn't get ugly. Some things get ugly sometimes, but I'm just so impressed with the way that the volunteers handled themselves with this. You know, they just appealed to us in a very civilised way, and we've got a great outcome, and I support the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Thoms.
I echo Councillor Sandra Mayer's words in that originally I was of the former position of the council, and having been approached by various members of the Visitor Information Volunteer Group, I certainly changed my position very quickly based on their true love and commitment of the visitor information service that they provide at the Frankston foreshore, and I'm very happy to see this turnaround from council. It's one that I'm pleased to support, and I hope that this is a way forward for volunteers and the council to better manage and service the tourism industry within Frankston. So it's a good outcome for the volunteers.
Thank you very much. Councillor Aiken.
Well, I was at the meeting with the volunteers, with you, Mr Mayor. And what became very evident is the passion and the great regard that these people have for what they do and how they serve the Frankston community and how they interact, particularly how they interact personally with visitors from other places. And it's that personal interaction that does more than any other thing. So, you know, there were a number of things became very evident in the discussion with them, a number of avenues of how the information services could be delivered and how it could be diversified. Those things only were possible through discussion, which certainly should have happened in the first instance and didn't. Nevertheless, we thank the visitor information volunteers for their patience, and we together can work for a better outcome, and I'm sure that that will happen.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors wish to enter debate? If not, I'd just like to say I was also, as Councillor Aiken said, at the meeting with the volunteers, and I've always known how well they work at the Visitor Information Centre. When I first became a councillor, back in 1980 whatever, I was a member of the Visitor Information Centre, which was placed now where the library is. And the same volunteer service was available then through a fantastic group of Frankston people. And Des, the work that you done to bring this to councillors' light, I knew, Councillor Aitken knew, and a few other councillors knew of the work you done, and you also you brought it to the attention of councillors that weren't perhaps quite au fait with the great work that you've done. And I, for one, support the motion, and well done, Des. Councillor Mayer.
Yeah, I'll never forget the excitement, joy, pride on the faces of the volunteers and the staff when we won that national award and we went to the Hall of Fame. And the best visitor information centre in the country stays.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to put it to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Okay, item number 11.2, the planning permit application is 197 Kringle Drive, Frankston. Oh, sorry. 11, oh, sorry, 11.1, I beg your pardon. 11.1 we're doing first. I've jumped. Which is the report on the findings and recommendations of the panel report, which is C123. Do I have a mover? Do I have a mover of this? Moved Councillor Sandra Mayer, seconded. Councillor Toms. Councillors Mayer, do you wish to enter debate on this?
Just briefly, this has been a long time coming. There's been a shift from the previous council where the building heights were considerably higher, and I think this is a better outcome. I understand the residents' concerns about not having mandatory height controls, but I remember years ago we talked about this, and I think we did have mandatory height controls some time ago in the Frankston Town Centre, and they expired. And we wrote to the planning minister and said, could we please extend them? And they said no. So planning ministers do not like mandatory height controls. So, I mean, we could consider tonight to change the wording. I don't think that will be accepted by the minister. What we currently have now will. It's been out to the planning panel. The submissions have been taken into consideration. The councillors have taken the residents' concerns on board, and I think that this is a happy compromise, and it's definitely better than what we had. So, you know, we're taking into consideration the sensitive interface with the creek and the seaside and all the rest. We're not going to have a big Gold Coast wall, you know, along the beach side of Nepean Highway. So I'm just trying to move things along. So I've moved this, and we'll see what happens.
Councillor Toms.
Also, just briefly, Mr Mayor, this is a way forward for future development, sensible development in our city centre. I'm happy to have worked, like with some other councillors, with the community groups to come to a realisation that 20 metres would be the better height for the community rather than 32. What I will say is, in total agreement with you, is that no state planning minister will go for mandatory. That's 100% correct. So I would like it if they did. I'm sure every single councillor would and everybody in the room would, but that's not going to happen. So this is a way forward to allow for sensible and appropriate development within our sensitive coastal community. And Frankston is a unique city in the fact that we are one of only 2 municipalities that have a city centre and a foreshore so closely linked together. And we, of the 9 FMACs around Melbourne, so when I talk about the FMACs, I mean central activity districts, so places like Box Hill and Frankston and Geelong and places like that. There's 9 across Melbourne. We are one of them. We are one of only 2 that have our situation, so we have to be careful when we talk about planning within that environment. So I hope that councillors support this report of the officers.
Thank you. Councillor Cunill and then Councillor McCormick.
Mr Mayor, I've got a question for the town planning area, and it stems from the submissions made, so I'll enter debate and then ask the question. Otherwise you'll pull me up. Both the Long Island Residents Group and Frankston Beach Association talked about State Government Practice Note 60, which identifies exceptional circumstances where mandatory height controls can be considered for activity centres. So it's interesting that both those groups of or parties, if you like, mentioned this. With that in mind, I would like to suggest, and I'd like to ask the Town Planning Manager, why we couldn't actually put in this document the 20-metre height as a mandatory requirement rather than as a preferred requirement.
Okay, thank you.
Please.
Mr Papageorgiou.
Through you, Mr Mayor, my response would be similar to Councillor Mayer's assessment. This issue has been discussed before. Indeed, the submissions did come from both the community groups the first time around in terms of Council's consideration of the amendment. We did make inquiries about Geelong and also with the state government, and the response we got was that very exceptional circumstances would be looked at for mandatory controls, that the expectation in activity centres was to go with flexible controls, and that the example in Geelong, for example, applied to the parkland rather than the commercial areas which were then further inland. So we could, as an option, ask for that. However, the advice that we've had to date has been that it would be very unlikely to be supported by the Minister.
Councillor Cunill.
Yeah, Mr Mayor, given that advice, I understand it all, and I think 20 metres is what's been asked for by the community, and I certainly never supported 32 metres.
You're entering debate now, are you?
Well, I hadn't finished.
Well, you're going to answer a question, or are you entering debate?
Mr Mayor, I'll support this as long as the report that's going to the panel report, I'll support this as long as we make it clear that we want the 20-metre height limit to be mandatory and not preferred. I mean, if it's in State Government Practice Note 60, there's a chance they might actually approve it.
He's in debate. He just said he was. He just said he was.
How do we achieve that, Mr Mayor?
Oh, well, you want to ask Mr Papageorgiou?
Yes, please.
Through you, Mr Mayor, you could simply add a recommendation saying that that a mandatory maximum building height of 20 metres apply to that part of the precinct 1B between the Nepean Highway and Cannock Creek.
Well, Mr Mayor, given the advice, I'd like to suggest to the mover and seconder that we include that exact condition. Wording.
Okay.
Please,
I need to ask the mover and the seconder.
Yep, I'm happy to run the gauntlet and to see how we go. Okay. And if it gets knocked back, we'll just be back to where we were, which is just as is now. So I'm happy. Okay. Happy to give it a go.
All right, Councillor Toms, are you happy with that?
Councillor Cunill is right. We can try. So okay. Yes.
All right. Councillor McCormick wants to enter debate.
Yeah, and if just before I do, on that note, would it not be simpler just to amend 3F and remove the word preferred and replace it with mandatory? Because that was going to be the basis of my request.
On page 5, you want them to remove preferred and insert mandatory. Is that acceptable by the mover and seconder?
Yes.
That's been accepted. Okay.
Yeah, I think that'll simplify matters. Now, if I can enter into debate. I agree with Councillor Cunill, and obviously councillors are falling into line with this position that we don't preempt the Minister's decision on this one. We actually ask the question before self-defeating. We do live in a unique part of the world, and I think we all recognise that we live in a unique part of the world. It will only be unique and precious if we continue to place controls over it to ensure that it remains unique and viable. As it happens, we have a city centre that evolves around the Cannock Creek precinct. It evolves around the foreshore. That means that environmental concerns and constraints need to be put on development in order to protect those assets that we have. If we don't protect them now, Frankston won't be the same. We will lose everything that we've had. The coastal village atmosphere, as much as we're moving to a central activity centre, there is no reason why we can't keep our coastal feel and preserve our environment. So I think we should be asking for mandatory requirements. We should be referring to Practice Note 60, and we should be putting forward the best case that we can about the exceptional place that Frankston is and the exceptional circumstances that exist with respect to this particular planning scheme amendment.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Bolam and then Councillor Aitken.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got a question to
Councillor Kuhnel.
Mr. Papagiorgio. On page 9 of the report, in terms of a summary of the issues that were raised throughout the submission process, there was a dot point that revolves around materials and colours to complement the coastal location. My question is, what is the standard for a universal colour scheme? Just out of curiosity, how do we make that determination? I mean, I look at Young Street and it's almost schizophrenic in its disposition. You've got yellow, you've got orange, you've got grey. How do we determine as a council a universal colour scheme?
Mr. Papagiorgio.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll answer it by referring to the guidelines that have been prepared. They are guidelines, so they're meant to be suggestions. So they've got urban as well as coastal and contemporary treatments. That's not to say that everybody has to use those, but it's meant to give an indication to potential applicants that that's the sort of materials that we've considered. And also then there's the wording that's referred to elsewhere that treats that sensitive interface and then tries to put into different words the type of feel we're trying to get. So it's very difficult to be very, very prescriptive because we want to allow innovation, but we do want to give people a good idea of the sort of outcome we're looking for in those areas.
So one further question, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Papagiorgio. On page 17, in the second last paragraph, there's mention of new development should be consistent with the design, form, layout, proportion and scale. So I presume that would include a colour scheme. Again, my reading of that is that the word should, I mean, there's no authority to that. So are you saying it's not something that has to be adhered to? Is that my reading of it?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's meant to be a guideline. So in the title of that section and in sort of decision guidelines, it's meant to give some idea about the outcomes that we're after, but it stops short of saying you must use this colour in this location, because we'd like to look at innovation but also give guidance. So hence the workshop that we held with the residents talking about the type of character and feel expected in that canonical precinct, and we hope that the sort of illustrations in that document carry through the ideas about the sort of human scale we're after without necessarily saying it must be this colour or this material.
Okay, Councillor Aitken.
Yes, look, I think whilst the inclusion of 20 metres mandatory height is a very good inclusion to have in this document, and I think that's commendable. The rest of the document, the general thrust of the document is absolutely dead as far as I'm concerned, because it is basically built on a blueprint that's provided to abide by state government requirements. The state government doesn't live here. They live in other places. They live in places remote from Frankston. And the bureaucrats that construct these planning laws, they don't live here. They live in other places, and some of them are very amenable, like Kyneton and big historic homes in Kyneton. And I know one such person is involved in key state planning that in fact does live there as well as their Melbourne home, but I won't mention names, of course. So the people who have these high positions, Mr. Mayor, and have vast incomes, make proclamations. They make proclamations across whole communities. My opinion is that the people of Frankston and the people of our community should be the ones who determine their future in town planning, not people who are remote from here and may in fact never be here at all. I think the general thrust of the document is devoid of humanity. It is certainly well and truly catering for commercial possibilities. The big thing that's forgotten in all of this, and I keep on and on and on about it, and I'm so glad in a way that this is now live streamed, because it's permanent recording, I hope it's permanent, of words that are spoken here, and maybe they'll be carried into the future. And that is that Frankston streets are narrow. They are narrow. You go to Greater Dandenong, where they're constructing very high buildings under the rebuilding Dandenong proposal, and most of them are very unpleasant buildings too, I must add. They really are pretty poor imitations of the 1960s, and they will date, and they'll date very badly. The trouble is, you build those buildings of anything around that height in Frankston, and you're going to have our streets shadowed and cold forever. Forever, Mr. Mayor. Am I getting 30 seconds? Or
You are.
Is that what it is? Okay, thank you. So I'm not going to support the whole document. I think the document's as dry as the Sahara. It's as hopeless as anything could be hopeless. I'm not saying that the town planners haven't done the best of their capability with the materials that they've got at hand.
Thank you, councillor. Your 30 seconds is well
It's
overdue.
absolutely a farce.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Leon O'Connor.
Yeah, this document's a long time coming. A lot of effort and preparation was put into this. So I'm really happy to see the wording change from preferred to mandatory. I'm really comfortable with that moving forward. We never know what the minister's decision is going to be, but we never know till we try. And this is the best way forward, and get this on the ground and rolling. And I'm pretty happy with this.
Thank you, councillor. Any other councillor Cunio?
Mr. Mayor,
Didn't you already?
No, I'm just. There was a suggestion by Councillor Councillor McCormick at condition F.
Yeah, it was agreed to.
Yeah, so we've got it in twice now, that's all. We've got it in F and the new one. Does that matter? That's all I'm asking.
Mr. Papagiorgio.
No, it doesn't matter, because you're just reinforcing the point. My only concern was that we might have to redraft part of it if it's going to be mandatory, but by putting it in both places, you've made it very clear what you're after.
Thank you. Any other councillors wish to speak on this matter? Okay, Councillor Sandra Mayer, could you sum up?
Yes, Councillor Aitken may be right. It might not be an inspirational document, but we're now at a point where most of us are comfortable with it, and I think that definitely we, the residents, are best placed to decide how our city should look. And anyone that feels very strongly about this can reinforce that, considering it's a state election year, that we'll be looking at the minister's decision very closely.
Thank you, councillor. Okay, I'm going to put it to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Hampton, Councillor O'Connor, Councillor Cunill, Councillor Bolam, Councillor Toms, Councillor Mayer, Councillor O'Reilly and Councillor McCormick. Those against? Councillor Aitken. That motion's carried. Okay, item number 11.2. Okay, it's moved by Councillor O'Reilly, the officer's recommendation. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second.
Seconded Councillor Mayer. So it's moved and seconded. Councillor O'Reilly and Councillor Mayer, do you wish to speak on this?
Very briefly, Mr. Mayor. We had a meeting, was it last Thursday or the Thursday before, I can't remember, out at Coringal about the new development. The one thing about shopping centres is that, as we're all aware, that things are very much going online, which puts a lot of pressure on retail. We see a lot of empty shops around, and Coringal, like other shopping centres, e.g. Chadstone, Southland and so forth, is looking to redevelop. It's going to be a very, very big redevelopment. It's going to involve a lot more space, a lot more open space, a lot more greenery, and it's also going to include this very large sign. Now, this sign we spoke about in December, and it was deferred as there was some concerns. Having met with the people down at the Coringal Hub last week, I was very, very happy with the proposal. Now, this sign itself is there because the Coringal hub runs alongside the Eastlink, which the Eastlink has tens of thousands of cars driving past every day. And the reason why the sign is of its height, which isn't unusual, it's not something that hasn't been done before. It is not something that will set a precedent for other shopping centres in the area. The reason why this is being put forward is because the Coringal hub runs alongside the Eastlink, and therefore it is able to attract people from the Eastlink to our stores.
Peninsula Link.
What did I say?
Eastlink.
Oh, sorry, Eastlink, Peninsula Link. They're all intermingled. Okay, the planning application not only passes our planning requirements, it doesn't have any objections from Vic Roads, and there are only initially 2 residents that have objected. Those residents we haven't heard from since. I myself am a local resident of the area, and I have absolutely no problem with it. I not only don't have any problem with it, I'm really looking forward to going up there. I think it's going to really redevelop the area, it's going to look fantastic, and even Councillor Hampton was quite excited about the extensive car parking they're going to put in there. So as far as I'm concerned, this is a really great thing for the area. It's going to look magnificent, and I'm really looking forward to it going ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Mayor, you wish to? Right, okay. Councillor Aiken.
I oppose this application totally. The nature of it will change that part of the face of Frankston forever. It is a brutal and unnecessary impost in the Frankston environment. It is gaudy. It is a case of commercial greed overtaking good planning, common sense. Mr. Mayor, the scale of the proposed sign is excessive and would unreasonably and detrimentally impact upon the low-scale vegetated landscape character and amenity of the area by reason of its range of visibility, including illumination at night. The proposed sign is contrary to the outdoor advertising signage policy, clause 22.09 of the Frankston planning scheme, in that it would visually dominate and detract from the character of the area. Additionally, the sign is contrary to specific objectives for Peninsula Link to encourage modest signage. Modest? This is 7 stories high. 7 stories high. Modest signage, and discourage major promotional signs where they will have an adverse visual impact on the landscape and design of East Link and Peninsula Link freeway corridors. This is a disgrace. This is a public disgrace. If this council seriously entertains, and we have a mover in this chamber tonight, we have a mover for this to advance and go ahead. If this actually seriously goes ahead, it calls this whole council's credibility into question to such an extent that one can only wonder, is this council really capable of making properly balanced planning decisions? Should this council be administered, Mr. Mayor? Should it be administered?
Councillor, be quiet for a minute.
What did you
okay.
know, Mr. Mayor?
In your opinion.
It's fine, in my opinion.
Is it in your opinion?
Yeah, it's in
Thank
my
you.
opinion, that's fine.
Okay.
This brings forward the question in the minds of some people, Mr. Mayor, should council disappear and be administered if this is the best that Frankston City Council can do for its community? This is an aberration. It is wrong in every sense. I will not be overturned by any commercial overtures to see our landscape mutilated by a sign 7 stories high, and no one can justify that. No one.
Thank you. Councillor Toms.
Mr. Mayor, I echo the concerns of Councillor Aitken. I hate to think that such a grotesque, oversized sign would be placed on Frankston Beach, heaven forbid, or down in the middle of our city centre, heaven forbid. This sets a dangerous precedent going forward in this municipality. Well, it does. It sets a dangerous precedent, and I think once we make this decision, this council will see massive signs like this go up all across the municipality, and we won't be able to stop it. That is the reality. So if there's councillors that feel comfortable with that reality, that's far from my comfortable, because my comfortable is that this doesn't go ahead, that this is too high, this does not comply with the Frankston planning scheme, and I will not be supporting the officer's recommendation.
Do I have any other councillors wish to enter debate on this? Councillor Boland.
Just a question to Mr Papageorgiou. The comment was just made it doesn't comply with the Frankston planning scheme. I believe it does. Can we get some clarity?
Through you, Mr Mayor, in the report we go through all the policy frameworks and we refer to the particular circumstances of this as a major activity centre. It's second only to the FMAC. There is no other major activity centre, and the particular function of the sign is to be read from the freeway. So it is quite a unique circumstances, and our recommendation is that it does comply.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor.
So just confirming it does comply with the planning scheme. Okay, thank you. Can I ask a question about the level of consultation? And sorry, I don't have the original report in front of me. How many submissions were received, and what was the count?
There were 2 submissions that were concerned about lighting and glare and increased traffic.
So both of those submissions were in opposition? But both of those submissions, were they in opposition?
That's correct, there are objections.
That's it. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Aitken, you're wanting my attention?
The Mayor.
Yes.
This point number 2 was put together by our planning department today. The proposed signs contrary to the outdoor advertising signage policy clause 2209.
Councillor,
is that correct or is that not?
I don't.
That was written by the planning department today.
You're
is
reading,
that correct or is that not?
You're reading a foreshadowed motion, which is not.
I'm asking a question.
Eh? Hasn't been foreshadowed. So.
It's an alternate motion, Mr Mayor. But there's been a comment made, there was a question asked, is this contrary to the scheme? And the answer was basically no. Yeah. But it is contrary to the outdoor advertising signage policy clause 22.09.
Okay, you're asking that question. Okay.
So it is
Councillor,
contrary.
Mr Papageorgiou.
Through you, Mr Mayor, we refer to aspects of the outdoor advertising policy, Council's guidelines and policy in the report. So we refer to the objectives about being viewed from the freeway. The words that we prepared for Councillor Aitken's alternate referred to different words there that talked about appropriate to a freeway context, and so it's a question of opinion.
Thank you very much.
Mayor, I've got a statement here. It's contrary to the outdoor advertising signage. Can that be confirmed or not? Policy.
Mr Papageorgiou, can you confirm that?
Clause 2209. Is that correct or is that not?
So that is an interpretation of elements of the outdoor policy.
Interpretation. Okay. Have I got another councillor wishing to speak on this matter? Councillor McCormick.
Just briefly, I think the point being made is that it's arguable whether or not it meets with the guidelines. The recommendation that has been moved before us by the council officers is that it does, but there's certainly an argument to be made that it doesn't, especially given that there is no sign of this magnitude anywhere within the municipality at this stage. So when councillors are referring to setting a precedent, it certainly does. It will be the first of this magnitude in the municipality. Therefore, any future applications will be dealt with on the basis of this particular signage being in existence. And, there will always, no doubt, be extenuating circumstances or commercial imperatives for particular signage, but it's whether or not as a municipality we want to have that kind of visual bulk become prominent anywhere in the municipality. I, for one, don't want to see signage of this magnitude. It's simply too large, and I think there are alternatives for the shopping centre to look at in terms of encouraging custom from the Peninsula Link and various areas. So I won't be supporting the motion that's before us, and had Councillor Aitken had the opportunity to put forward his alternate recommendation, I would have supported that.
Okay, are any other councillors wish to speak on this? Councillor?
Yeah, just briefly, I know people
Noel.
are keen to hear other issues. I'm going to actually abstain on this, and I don't like to abstain, but given that there's too much greyness about whether it's consistent with the planning scheme or not, I think it's best for me to err on the side of caution. And the reason why I'm following this approach is, if this were to go to VCAT, our biggest defence or our biggest justifier would be it being inconsistent with the planning scheme. The fact we can't tonight ascertain that leaves me no choice but to abstain on this matter, which is disappointing. So perhaps in the future we need to get more clarity before these things come into the chamber as to whether it's these things are consistent or not with our own planning schemes. I think it's also important not to confuse the meeting we had Thursday week with this proposal. That was about the wholesale redevelopment of the Kringle Hub site. This is about a sign. So I think we need to stick on the issue and not look at the broader proposal that's been put forward by Kringle Hub. That's all I'm prepared to say within the context of planning on this matter.
Thank you. Any other councillors? No? Well, I wish to say something.
I'll speak after you.
Okay. I'd just like to say that sometimes in here the theatrics in this place would put Peter O'Toole to shame. I was the only councillor that actually turned up on the day for the demonstration height with this balloon. And it was a very windy day. I had this huge balloon at the back of Kringle Hub, and I mean at the back of Kringle Hub. It's not in a huge position at the front. It's right at the back of Mitre 10, quite an obscure place to put a sign, but they put one there. Anyway, they were going to put it up to 25 metres with the balloon, so I was going to go down the freeway and come and try and look at the balloon from the freeway, but I got just near the entrance of Kringle Hub to get out onto the freeway, and I got a phone call, you'll have to come back because the balloon has escaped. The balloon escaped in the wind. By the time I got back, it was up 10,000 feet in the sky. But fortunately, the owners of Kringle had done a video beforehand, and the video shows quite well how intrusive this sign would be. And to be honest with you, I don't think it's intrusive at all. It's not as intrusive as most of the signs along Peninsula Link, which hit you in the eye when you're driving. And I'm talking about driving, councillors, you know, some of us do. And I drive on that highway all the time. And there are signs on that highway that hit you in the eye. This one, honestly, you can hardly see the damn thing when you're coming from the south. The only time you really get a good view is when you're coming to the north. And can we just say this? That development in Kringle Hub is going to be magnificent. It's a $110 million development.
Mr. Mayor, I've got to call a point of order. And the point of order is number 59B is irrelevant to the matter under consideration. We're talking about the sign, we're not talking about the redevelopment.
Well, I'm talking about the sign.
Mr. Mayor, I've called a point of order. We've got to be very careful, as you know.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, I don't adhere to your point of order, because I'm talking about the sign and why the sign is there. The sign is there because of the development and for no other reason.
I'll let you keep going, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And as I said, you can hardly see the sign coming from the south, but coming from the north you can actually see it. And this development is, as I said, a $110 million development. They wanted to display that sign, and it is not intrusive. Like other people have said, it is not as intrusive as what they said, because it's in the rear of the car park at Kringle.
Is that a fact, or is that your opinion, Mr. Mayor?
Well, councillor, it's got nothing to do with you. I'm trying to talk. Do you mind being quiet?
Is that an opinion?
I said, do you mind being quiet?
Oh, just the...
Okay. I was quiet and I had the courtesy to be quiet when you were talking. I think you should give me the same courtesy. Anyway, I did have concerns about the height, and that's why I actually went down there on the day to try and view it. And I have to say, no other councillor was here other than myself. So I went out my way to find out, and fortunately they'd taken a video, and the video showed quite clearly it could be seen, but it's not intrusive. So I'll be voting for it. Councillor Mayer.
Yes, as was stated, Kringle Hub is our second largest activity centre, and we even have a structure plan for the area. Apparently the owners of the shopping centre have great plans for the future, which is great for the local residents and great for our local economy. I'm reassured in hearing that it's not going to be too much of an eyesore, which is very comforting to know. I think there's a new sign. I was just trying the other day. I was trying to remember where it was. I think it was at the start of the Frankston Freeway, and I think it's Aqua, and it's massive, and it just hits you in the face. I thought if it's like that, there's no way I'd support it. But yeah, I think I'm okay with this one.
Okay, councillors, I'll put it to the vote. All those in... Oh, sorry, Councillor O'Reilly, you want to you sum up, please?
Okay. I'm a little bit nervous. I didn't realise what we were doing here. I thought it was a sign at a shopping centre, but obviously it's more than that. Okay, I will sum up by not going over the old things. We've been over this many times. It is a sign at a shopping centre, but what I like to do is to go over the arguments again and see if I can contradict them. Now, I just took a look at the people that are complaining about this development, and I just want to know if any of these are actual planning arguments or they're just statements, because this is all I got. It's a public disgrace. It's a disgrace. It's brutal. It's unnecessary. It's bad common sense planning. It destroys the credibility of the council. It destroys our ability to make decisions. It's an aberration. It's wrong in every sense. It's 7 stories high. It's 7 stories high. It's 7 stories high. It's a dangerous precedent. Well, unfortunately, they're not genuine planning arguments. They're opinion and they're statements. The genuine planning arguments are in the planning report, and they've been put together by our officers who approve this. And there's no objection to Vic Roads, and there's only 2 objections from residents, of whom we haven't heard from in months. I will also point out that 7 stories high, I don't even know what that really is, that the Chadstone Shopping Centre is going to have a hotel of 13 stories high, almost double. And as far as it being signs going up everywhere and there being a dangerous precedent, well, we just had a submission from someone who clearly explained the only reason we're having a sign like this is because it goes past the Peninsula Link. And they wouldn't bother doing it anywhere else because it's completely unnecessary. So anyway, to finish up, if you reject something without valid planning grounds, simply based on a whole bunch of dancing and singing in the chamber, it goes to VCAT and gets overturned.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
In my opinion, it goes to VCAT and will get overturned.
What's your point of order,
The comments
Councillor?
about dancing and singing are offensive. And
Yes.
59F, it's offensive. I believe the councillor is trying to belittle the genuine comments that are made in a balanced way by another councillor.
You want to make a decision on this? I uphold your point of order. Okay, Councillor, continue.
I apologise. I did think it was a little bit of over-dramatisation, but that is my opinion.
You weren't trying to be dramatic, were you?
Oh, no, not at all. I don't like to be dramatic at all. Again, like I said, another comment was made that it is commercial greed. Now, I go to the Kringle Shopping Centre all the time, and I explained this last time. They are not big, evil conglomerates. They're little stores. Yes, it is a big company that is doing this redevelopment, but they are renting the shops and they need their businesses to survive. So, like I said, I spoke to a few of them. They were quite happy to see this. In fact, they were excited about it. And I'm looking forward to seeing this go up because I think it's a great thing for the small businesses, it's a great thing for the area, and it's a great thing for Frankston City to have our retail sector supported in this way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll now put it to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Hampton, Councillor Cunial, Councillor Mayer, Councillor O'Reilly. All those against? Councillor Lillian O'Connor, Councillor Councillor Aitken, Councillor Toms and Councillor McCormick. And one abstention. It's now 4-all, and on the chair I shall vote that this go through. Thank you, councillors. Okay, item number 11.3, which is a planning permit for 3 McLean Court, Frankston. Do I have a mover?
Mr Mayor, I move that the matter be deferred to the next ordinary meeting.
Okay, it's been moved the matter to be deferred. Do I have a seconder? Seconded, Councillor Aitken. Okay, Councillor Toms and Councillor Aitken, do you wish to speak on this matter?
Isn't procedural?
Oh, it's a procedural motion, beg your pardon. Okay, it's a procedural motion, there's no discussion, so I'll put it. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. This item will be deferred to the next meeting. Okay. Okay. I just make mention that the next meeting is on the 23rd for people that want to come along to it. All right. Item number 11.4, which is 21 Edward Street. Do I have a mover of that? Move to be deferred by Councillor Aitken. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second.
Seconded, Councillor Mayer. Okay.
Mr Mayor, Mr Mayor, I've got a question to the mover. Just pondering, when will this come back? When are you planning on it coming back?
Come back to the next meeting of council.
Okay. Do we need to stipulate that, or have the officers?
Yeah, you do. You need to stipulate that. Okay, it's been moved and seconded that it be deferred. There's no discussion on it. I'll go straight to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Okay. Item number 11.5, which is in page 258.
I'll move.
Moved by Councillor Mayer, seconded. Oh, was it? I thought it came from, sorry, Councillor McCormick. I heard the voice come from over there. Okay. Moved by Councillor McCormick, seconded by Councillor Mayer. Okay, do you wish to speak on this, councillors? Does any other councillors wish to speak on it? All right, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously.
Mr Mayor, could I request that we have a break?
Yeah, we can. I'll have a break for 10 minutes. Back at 9:10. Coming. There are pigeons in your pigeonhole. God. Councillor McCormick. Okay, we'll resume the meeting at 9:11. Item 12.1, resolution progress update. Moved Councillor Aitken, seconded Councillor Cunial. Councillor Cunial and Councillor Aitken wish to speak on this matter? Anyone wish to speak on this matter? No? All right, I'll put it. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. The Victorian Electoral and ALGA National...
Mr Mayor, I have an alternative recommendation.
Hang on. Let me go to it.
And Mr Mayor, it's the inclusion of one single line. I've added a line D in number 2, which should read Belvedere Sporting Precinct, and in brackets, capital workspace priority.
Okay, it's been moved by Councillor Bolam. Seconded?
Yeah, Mr Mayor, I'll second.
Seconded by Councillor Toms. Councillor Bolam, would you like to speak on this matter? Councillor Toms? On this matter?
Thank you. My concern with the original recommendation is that it omits any reference of funding opportunities for the Belvedere Sporting Precinct. And when I talk of the Belvedere Sporting Precinct, I talk of not just the existing, hopefully soon to be renamed Linden House facility, but also the Belvedere Bowls Club. The Linden House proposal, we've heard different figures ranging from $3 million to $7 million, all the way up to $12 million. It's going to be a costly exercise, and I think the council to take on those costs alone is unrealistic. So we need to be reaching out to our state and federal counterparts, and this upcoming trip to Canberra is an ample opportunity for the Mayor and Councillor Toms to put the case forth that this is a great proposal that can deliver some great outcomes for the community, not just from a sporting or health perspective, but also giving a publicly funded facility back to the people of Seaford, which is very important. So that's why I've included that addition.
Councillor Toms.
I don't need to say anything, Mr. Mayor.
Any councillors? Councillor Cunill.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to speak very briefly. I'm a little bit concerned about adding other projects to the list of things we are advocating for. We've known for some time, this council, and we've agreed for some time on what we would be advocating for in the lead up to the next state election, which is happening in November. So we don't know what the cost is going to be to prepare Linen House for what it's going to be used for in the future, and I don't think it's fair to include Belvedere Sporting Precinct at this stage. It should have been something that was discussed with other councillors, and it's something that should have been agreed to by the entire council.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, point of order. Error of fact, this was discussed last Monday at the pre-agenda meeting.
Well, I can't remember that.
I do. You were complaining.
Oh, right.
I can't remember, but regardless of that, Mr. Mayor, we've known for a long time now what the advocacy projects are, and I disagree with adding anything else to it. I think we need to concentrate on what we've all agreed to and press on from there. So I can't support it, I'm sorry. If it fails, I'll move the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Aiken.
Mr. Mayor, the situation with Linen House has changed, as we all know, because of the LXRA works, and that's, whilst it's been a long time coming, when it did happen, it happened quickly. And that does substantially change the circumstances around relocation of clubs and also of the future needs for that building. That building, to accommodate what council desires to do, or I would think, is going to cost a lot of money. It's only reasonable to see it as a major project in the city, for which we would, I would think, if we can have any way of avoiding paying all the costs, then I would think that would be desirable. I know that there will be some offset through an agreement made already, but I don't see that it's unreasonable to try and do better for our community if we can, and that is the intent of that point. And I support it completely, and in fact I think it's very fair. It would be unfair to our community if we didn't put it there.
Thank you. Any other councillors wish to speak to this? Councillor Mayer?
Yeah, I don't have any strong opposition to this. My only concern is that just because it was mentioned at a pre-agenda meeting last Monday doesn't mean that we've actually made a decision as a council as to what the future of the site is. So we had a briefing, which I won't talk about, in the public meeting because I don't know if it's confidential or what, but about the possible future use of the site, and there was a number of parties that were at the briefing, and they were just there to present a possible option to us, but we haven't actually decided that. So I'm just kind of in my head going through, it's April now, this will be going to Canberra in June, so what are we actually going to be briefing ministers on if we don't know what it is that we want in that precinct and how much it's going to cost? So that's my only concern with it. If we had have discussed as a group and we had have decided as a group what we wanted to do with that precinct, I would wholeheartedly support adding that in.
Okay, any other councillors wish to enter debate on this? No other councillors? Well, I'll enter debate on this. I think it's very unfair that this proposal be put up, and I can't remember it being put up last Monday, but I don't remember a lot of things. I'm getting old. But to say that this would be a priority over and above other capital works projects that we have at hand, I think is very unfair, especially bearing in mind that I went and negotiated with LXRA $2.8 million towards Belvedere and the complex at Belvedere. I think that once we get to understand and know what needs to be done at Belvedere, then we can then start to lobby governments, especially the federal government, because by then we'll have that opportunity. But to jump in and put this project in and above every other project in every other ward, I think is very, very unfair, especially bearing in mind what works are going to be done at Belvedere in the next 6 months. $2.8 million worth of work. And I mean, I'll do whatever you tell me to do as a councillor. I'll go and negotiate anything you want me to. But I think this, to make it a priority, is not good. It came up at the last minute and hasn't had a real good, we haven't all had a real good talk about it. So I vote against it.
Thank you for that. So I think it's worth mentioning first and foremost, and this is where I go into self-preservation mode. If you look at that list up on the screen, you have every single ward covered for a capital project, sans the Northwest ward, which has nothing. So from my perspective as a ward councillor, it's in my best interest to ensure that we get a piece of the funding pie. Now, let's face the reality, or let's face the facts. This proposal, this facility cannot operate without monies. And I think it's unfair for the council to wholly and solely be expected to fund that facility, particularly if it's going to have a regional focus. If we don't fund it now, when is it going to open? You know, the next opportunity we'll have to go to Alga is next June to advocate for these monies. And I don't think the expectation should be that we wait for this opportunity this time next year. You've also got to keep, thank you, you've also got to keep in mind that the public expect this facility to be reopened, and I am not in the mood, nor do I think the majority of councils around this room are in the mood for or of delaying the reopening of this facility, the Belvedere precinct. And not only am I talking about Linden House, again, we're also talking about the Belvedere Bowls. So there's a multifaceted approach to this precinct's proposal. It's not just one facility, it's multiple facilities. And if the council doesn't put up its hand now and seek monies, it's going to delay the inevitable reopening of this facility. The officers have said to us internally, funding is required. The officers have said to us, the facility cannot be functional unless this funding is sought. Therefore, council, by virtue and using deductive logic, needs this money. So I think what I'm asking for is not unrealistic, and you know, it's something that we need to do.
Okay, thank you, councillor. All right, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor O'Connor, Councillor Bolam, Councillor Aiken, Councillor Toms, and Councillor McCormick. All those against? Councillor Hampton, Councillor Cunill, Councillor Mayor, Councillor O'Reilly. That motion's carried. Okay, this next item I have an interest, so I shall be moving out. I've not got a direct interest, but I have an interest, so I think it's better for me to actually leave the chair and call on the Deputy Mayor to come and take the chair.
Okay, 12.3, outbound delegation to sister city, Sino, Japan. Do I have a mover?
I'll move.
Mover Central Mayor. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Cunill. Thank you. Did a mover wish to speak?
Yes, I will. So every couple of years we take turns with Susono, and I'm not sure if we do the same for Wooshie as well, but I know that we have a Susono association and they come here 1 year and then we go there the next. I think that's how it works. And with the Japanese, it's all about honour as well. So I think there is a little bit of a concern because we have had a discussion prior to today about there being some opposition to the mayor attending and representing Frankston in Japan. I'm not sure if there'll still be a delegation going anyway, but yeah, it's sort of not a good look if we don't have a council representative. Some years we haven't had the mayor, we've had another councillor going, but I don't see a problem with this, so I support the recommendation.
Thank you.
I've got a question,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor. The question is to yourself or the CEO. Given that the Mayor will be out of the country for quite a few days, will the acting Mayor provisions be activated?
Thank you.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, to Councillor Bonham, in the absence of the Mayor, the Deputy Mayor takes precedent if there was a council meeting, for example, and other meetings that required the attendance of the Mayor. If the Mayor is not in the country, then it would fall to the Deputy Mayor to undertake those duties.
Thank you. Councillor Colonel, do you wish to speak?
Yeah, look, I'll speak pretty briefly. I think councillors, when making a decision on this, have to consider a couple of things, and probably there's two important things in my view. One is that the Frankston Sasono Friendship Association is a sister-city relationship that we have with the city of Sasono at the foothills of Mount Fuji or Mount Fujiyama in Japan. That relationship's been going for 36 years. It's a great, the Frankston Sasono Friendship Association is a really good group of people who have an interest in the Japanese culture. They actively get involved with kids that are learning Japanese in and around Frankston. They have speech contests once every so often. I think it's every 2 or 3 years. They have an Australian fair either in Sasono, or they have a Japanese fair within Frankston. Last time they had a Japanese fair, it was at Frankston High, and I think it was maybe last year or the year before, from memory. The other thing you need to consider is that because our relationship's been going for such a long period of time, it would only be fair to send a representative of this municipality over to Japan, and the obvious choice would be the mayor of this city. The cost in the report indicates that it would be around $2,400 for airfares and accommodation, or if the mayor is going, and if we vote that he goes, if he stays at a homestay situation, the cost would be $1,800. Either way, the cost is very minimal. So consider that when making a decision, councillors. I'm going to support it. I've been on the Frankston Sasono Friendship Association Committee during my first couple of years on council. We don't have a councillor representative anymore, but we do have an officer of council, Chris Hodgins, who does a good job in assisting the Frankston Sasono Friendship Association when they meet on a monthly basis for, I think, a couple of hours, or it might be every 2 months. I'm going to finish my debate by asking a question. I don't know if there's an officer here who can answer it. But the dates that are proposed, I'm just wondering if those dates are, or if the mayor goes, will he be away during one of the ordinary meetings? And I ask that because we don't actually have an acting mayor policy.
Through you, Madam Deputy Mayor, I'll try and see whether I can see Mr. Federico is quickly looking at the list of meeting dates. And through you, Madam Deputy Mayor, I've had confirmation from the other side of the room, the Mayor will be away for a council meeting, an ordinary meeting.
Sorry, I've got another question, similar to the one I just asked about the acting mayor provisions. Can the CEO or the relevant officer confirm to me that the acting mayor precedent is enshrined within the Local Government Act? Is that correct? Yeah.
Through you, Madam Deputy Mayor, Mr. Federico is going to the relevant section of the Local Government Act, but I believe it is. The precedent is set that in the event that the mayor cannot attend a council meeting, then the deputy mayor would take precedent.
Excellent, Tim. We can do that offline. That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Toms.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm happy to support the Mayor going to Sasono. The relationship between this city and Sasono City is a special one. I have been involved with the Sasono Friendship Association and all the wonderful work that Peter Patterson and Therese do, as was mentioned by Councillor Cunill. Councillor Cunill did mention the Japanese fair last year that he and I and the Mayor attended at Frankston High School. It was a wonderful cultural fair, and I think that the City of Sasono really values the friendship that we hold with them, and I think the City of Frankston equally so. So I think to not send a representative to this wonderful country, which I have been fortunate to visit for this purpose, would be a great shame. So I will be supporting the Mayor attending the events in Sasono.
Thank you. Do I have any other speakers? Yep, McCormick.
Thank you. I'm opposed to this. I'm opposed to council investing any money in the sister city relationships, full stop. I've mentioned that previously, but I'm certainly opposed to spending money on overseas trips. It was certainly part of my election campaign that I wouldn't be supporting overseas funded trips on behalf of councillors or mayors, so I will be voting against it. I can't see really any benefit to the city of Frankston that will come of the mayor visiting Japan. It is a friendship relationship, and there certainly is a friendship group, and there will be still a friendship group whether the mayor attends Sasono or not.
Okay. Thank you. Do I have any other speakers? Do you have a question?
Just a quick one.
Yep.
Can we confirm, is there a delegation going, or is it just the mayor by himself?
Through you, Madam Deputy Mayor, to Councillor Bolam, I understand that the Mayor would form a part of a delegation, including a number of the representatives of the Frankston Sasono organisation here.
Okay.
So he would be included in that delegation.
Thank you.
I do have a couple of words to say before I go ahead. I do agree with Queen McCormick's remarks. I'm very uncertain about this trip. I don't know what benefit it will provide to Frankston, so I'm a little unsure about that. But I hear the other point is quite a minimal cost trip, so I'll weigh that up at the end. Any other speakers?
Yeah, I'll just be quick. I don't agree with it. I wasn't aware Quinn did as well, but it was one of my campaign slogans was no overseas trips and oppose any who do. I remember many years ago, this is actually relatively cheap and cheerful comparatively to what our state and federal government counterparts do. I remember the Mayor of Glenora about 15 years ago flew business class to a sister city, and the cost of something like $6,000, and his reasoning for that was, well, mayors fly business class. It's good to see that we're not doing that. But I did say that I oppose overseas trips. I do oppose overseas trips, and I'm not a big fan of the sister city relationship. I don't see how having a sister city in opposed to all the other cities anywhere else in the world or in Japan can benefit us or benefit them. So I don't approve of it, so I'll be voting against this.
Okay, any other speakers? Get Councillor Bolam.
I wasn't going to talk on this as well, but as someone that's been to Sasono myself, I went there a skeptic and I came back a proponent. The experience that the kids go through, the kids that attend as part of the delegation, it's incredible. You know, the cultural immersion they experience. I think there were about 15 to 20 kids that went when I went in 2010, and it was amazing. They really got a lot out of it, and I think that's what we're forgetting out of all this debate is the cultural exchange aspect of this. I think in 2010 it was McClellan College, and I believe from what Councillor Cunill was saying, Frankston High have also sent students as well. So it's not one student segment that is having this marvellous experience. I sought clarity from one of the officers, and there is an Australian government federal initiative called the Colombo Plan, which is very similar, where students go overseas for a few weeks and they gain a different experience in a classroom environment. This is not quite on the same page, but again, this provides them the opportunity to experience a different culture and hopefully gain some real life experiences. So from that context, I think a $2,500 contribution is a very small investment, especially when we're talking about retaining the cultural respect and sensitivities of the people of Japan. So to me, it's a no-brainer.
Councillor Aiken.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Look, I've got mixed views on it. One is that I think that the cultural exchange aspect of it is quite okay, and I think that the experience that it provides for students or young people from the city, which it does and has done over a number of years, is excellent. But I also am mindful of the climate that we are in, and I think under any circumstances, pretty much, for the ratepayers of Frankston to see a member of council being flown over to Japan and back in a rate capping environment, which we're quick to remind the residents of, and the state government of as well. It's hard to convince people of the necessity for that. So on balance, I'm not against the delegation going, and I think that that's fine. But as far as a member of the council goes, I won't support that.
Anything else before I sum up?
You've spoken,
Yeah,
so
I've
I sum
spoken.
up. Yeah.
Yep, you sum up now.
Okay, so I really can't add much to what Councillor Bolam said. He spoke beautifully on it. I couldn't say it any better myself. In regards to rate capping, I actually made a mistake. I thought it was every year we alternate. It's actually been 4 years since we've been. So what do? Do we say no every time we're invited now because of rate capping? That's not a good look. Like I said, Japanese are all about honour. And, you know, the Chinese relationship, China are a major, power player economically in the world. And so it's sort of good to build relationships, and yeah, I don't think you can choose one over the other and to do a blanket policy of no overseas trips. I respect every councillor's right to vote however they see fit, and I don't know what the benefits will be, but I guess as a delegate, if Councillor Hampton Mayor has the opportunity to go, he's probably going to have to report back to the council, because I think that's actually something that we brought in for anyone who goes on a conference or anything like that. Under delegates' reports in every ordinary meeting, he would have to come back and report to us on what his learnings were and what he got out of the exchange. So it's a good way to find out, and it's not an expensive way to find out.
Okay, thank you. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Kunal, Councillor Bolam, Councillor Toms and Councillor Mayor. Those who oppose? Councillor O'Connor, Councillor Aiken, Councillor O'Reilly, Councillor McCormick. Now I have to cast in vote and I'll go oppose. Thank you. Alright, I'll bring the Mayor in.
God, I nearly went to sleep out there. Okay, we're on to 12.4, which is the Audit and Risk Committee Charter. Do I have a mover?
I'll move.
Move Councillor Sandra Mayer, seconded.
I'll second.
Seconded by Councillor Toms. Councillor Mayer, Councillor Toms, do you wish to talk on this issue?
No.
Councillor Toms? No. Any other councillor? No other councillor wishes to speak on this? I'll move that motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Okay, item number 12.5, establishment of a facade improvement grant and green wall proof of concept, which is on page... This is an alternate, is it?
Mr Mayor, there's an alternate. If this is last up, I'll shadow the alternate.
Just put it.
Just put the alternate? Yeah, okay.
Okay,
I move the
moved by-
alternate.
The alternate has been moved by Councillor Toms, seconded by Councillor Bolam. Councillor Toms, Councillor Bolam. Oh, sorry, Councillor Cunha. It's a bloody first time I've done it tonight. Oh, okay. I wasn't looking up. I thought I heard the voice.
It's $20 so far.
Okay, no, it's not. It's only
Yes,
10.
it is. I've been keeping score.
I done Sandra Mayer and I didn't do 2.
I'm the independent witness.
Thank goodness it's being recorded. I'll go back to the recording. Anyway, councillors, do you wish to speak on this item?
Just briefly, Mr Mayor, I'm pleased to see the direction that this is going in. Councillor Cunha and I have worked on this this alternate. This alternate is proposing that we do a proof of concept on a green wall here at the city centre, so a green leafy wall that'll make this city look all the better. I've been speaking about this for some time, about greening our city, and I will continue to. It's a wonderful thing that we need to do, and this is proposing a very reasonable amount of money be spent to get with what the rest of the country and councils around the country are doing, which is putting green walls around the city centre. So I absolutely support the alternate recommendation.
Councillor Cunha.
I'll reserve, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Aiken.
An adjustment made to the alternate, and point number 6 notes that detailed costings be made available, and then it says before the commencement of the works. I would prefer that that be firmed up and that it notes that detailed costings be made available to councillors to approve at a council meeting before the commencement of the works, because they're going to have to go under close scrutiny, those costs. That's the only way I'll vote for it.
Councillor?
Seems reasonable, Mr Mayor.
Well, okay, well that's item 6. You're okay with that? Second, are okay with that?
Yes, Mr Mayor.
Okay, all right. Do I have any councillors wish to talk to this? Councillor Boland.
Yeah, my apologies. I did advise Councillor Toms and Councillor Cunha that I was likely going to oppose this, and I will be opposing it. Firstly, I was the one that suggested to Councillor Toms that he pursue a proof of concept, and I'm pleased to see that he's taken that on board. I personally am supportive of green walling, especially green walls that uplift and transform an area, for instance, gentrification and or urban renewal purposes. However, the proposed trial costings are, in my view, quite outrageous. And I say this not to embarrass any staff member that wrote the report, but from a layman, these expenses are just incredible. And I say that in terms of both scope and expenditure. From a scope perspective, there's very little segments and or areas of a given building that are actually covered by the proposed green walling, and I refer to the various examples that councillors have a copy of. They only cover a very small area of a given building, and also the selected sites are not in areas that are in great need of urban renewal. For instance, this area here, I think it's safe to say this is the Paris end of Frankston. Where you really need this work is at the coalface around Young Street and around areas that are in great need of a bit of a spruce up. I also mentioned expenditure, and I believe that it can be done cheaper. And Councillor Aiken and I were having a chat before the meeting tonight, and given his experience, he seems to feel that it could be done a lot cheaper, not at an expense of $54,000 for one site. Furthermore, I think this reinforces the moronic sums that councils pay for capital projects. You know, if this was a residential development or if it was a community group based endeavour, I venture to say that the expense will be far less, but unfortunately expenditure in this case is highly inflated, and in my view it's hard to justify. Some of the prices that we got for a Key Street site in Frankston, $47,000. For a site in Seaford, the Seaford Community Centre, $35,000. For a site at the Frankston Function Centre, $32,000. For the Ballon Park toilet, I think we're looking at $32,000 if we covered all 3 walls. And for the Frankston Civic Centre, we're looking over $50,000 just to do 4 columns out the front of the building. So I find that very hard to justify. Here we are debating $2,500 for the mayor to go to Sasono, and yet we're potentially putting money up over $50,000 for one single green wall. So from my perspective, I find it very hard to justify.
Okay, Councillor Aiken.
Yeah, for one who is well acquainted with garden design and costs, I'm happy to support this proposal, but that's why I wanted point number 6 included. I think detailed costings have to be made available to councillors to approve at a council meeting before commencement of any works, because I just cannot in any way, shape or form understand how the types of costs that we've been provided with could ever be arrived at. Essentially, Mr Mayor, what it is putting a trellis up and planting plants. That's what it is. It is what it is. It's putting a trellis up and planting plants. How does that cost $54,000? I mean, you could build a small unit for that, or a part of a unit for that. And when we talk trellis, I'm not being silly and just saying go to a local outlet and buy some cheap pine trellising. Obviously, it's got to be steel and it's got to be affixed properly. That's reasonable, but that does not cost that sort of money. It never has. It never will, unless people decide that they want to be ripped off. So we need to have, first of all, I think there has to be quotations, a number of quotations if we're going to get this work done. And we have to see what those quotations are. We have to make comparisons about the materials. And I think we also need to exercise the common sense measure of going down to the local sales place and asking about metal grilling being cut up, how much it's going to cost, and how much we could actually pay for someone to just apply the Dynabolts to hold it on and then plant a plant. So the principle, fine, but the detail, gee, it's really going to have to be looked at closely.
Any other councillors wish to debate this? Councillor Mayor?
I'm really excited about this. Councillor Toms and I have been talking about it since he was elected to council and I was re-elected. And I know that it's one of those things that Councillor Aitken has always supported, greening and beautifying the city. And I wholeheartedly agree, actually, with everything that's been said. The cost is ridiculous, as is everything for council, and I'm hoping that it does come in at a reasonable amount of money and that it doesn't end up dying and it's well maintained and all the rest. And I have a garden full of succulents that I'm prepared to offer. You just snap off a bit and propagate it, just put it in a pot, and so I'm happy to offer them to the Indigenous nursery to actually they're those nice kind of purpley ones, you know, they're great. I'll offer them. Yeah, I'm excited about this and I wholeheartedly support it, and I think it's about time we beautified the Civic Centre. I will never forget Councillor Aitken's statement about the Civic Centre when we were shown some possible designs for the facade, and I don't know if I'm allowed to say it in public. You can't polish a ... Do you remember? It was hilarious. I couldn't stop laughing. Anyway.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cunior.
I'll be brief, Mr Mayor. There's a lot of things around this place that need to be beautified, Mr Mayor.
Is there?
A lot of things, probably me included. Anyway, look, I do fully support it. I think it's a great idea.
There's something about a sows here. You can't.
That's right. You can't do that to me. You can't make a silk purse out of me, can you? My mother adores me, fortunately. She's got dementia, so she probably doesn't know who I am. Look, I support it completely. I'd echo the concerns by a number of councillors now have indicated that the cost seems quite excessive. I agree, and it wouldn't surprise me if the detailed costings, when they do come back at a much more realistic figure. But I completely support it, and I would urge all councillors to support the motion.
Thank you. No other councillors? Councillor Toms, you want to sum up?
Yes, Mr Mayor, just briefly, a lot has been talked about cost, and I wholeheartedly agree we need to be prudent with ratepayers' money, but I will note that later in this meeting we're talking about other costs, and I think this cost is relatively minimal in respect to costing. So $50,000 is not for some people not a lot of money, but for council to be original and for council to put this wonderful greenscape on our building, I think is really original, and it should be celebrated.
Okay, councillors, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Hampton, Councillor Lillian O'Connor, Councillor Cunial, Councillor Aitken, Councillor Toms, Councillor Mayer, Councillor O'Reilly, Councillor McCormick. Oh, you're like that? You're scratching. Councillor McCormick, you had your hand up, didn't you? Yes. Normally it's the other way round. Normally I can't see, but... Okay, those against? Councillor... I was looking over here, got some abstention. Councillor O'Reilly is against. Abstentions? Councillor Bolam. Motion is carried. Okay, item 12.6, which is the Warrandyte Road to Lapwing Court Special Charge Scheme. Do I have a mover?
I'll move.
Okay, move Cassandra Mayer, seconded Councillor O'Reilly. Councillors, do you wish to speak on this?
Just quickly, I'm not even sure if this is my ward, because I think it all got redistributed and everything else.
It's half and half.
Okay. All right. Well, look, providing that the residents are happy, there's a lot in this recommendation. Again, it's probably a very long process to get to this point now, and so I support going out there and starting this special charge scheme. It says we've received a number of submissions, and yeah, ready to go.
Thank you. Councillor O'Reilly, do you wish to... Any other speakers on this? Well, if no other speakers, Councillor, would you like to sum up? Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Okay, Cannock Creek Management
I'll
and
move,
Settlement.
Mr Mayor.
I'll second, Mr Mayor.
Moved by Councillor Toms, seconded by Councillor Bolam. Councillor Toms, Councillor Bolam, do you wish to speak on this issue?
Yes, Mr Mayor, just briefly.
Okay.
This is providing a way forward for the issues surrounding the siltation at Cannock Creek. I was involved in a meeting last year with several community stakeholders and Melbourne Water, the EPA, and Parks Victoria with regards to this issue. I've been approached by the former mayor of this city, Barry Priestley, about this issue. I know that for the residents that live along Cannock Creek, this is a huge issue, and it should be a huge issue for all of us. So really where the responsibility should lay is with the state government, and yet somehow the state government are putting all the onus onto council and saying, council through the ministerial advisory committee, you have to pay, and you have to. It's your responsibility. Actually, it's the state government's responsibility. And yes, I'm pleased to see that council is spending $50,000 in the Capital Works program to develop a preferred option to manage the sediment issue. But I really think that the state government should be playing a greater role, and the local members of parliament with regards to this issue in one of our largest waterways in our municipality. So I support the officer's recommendation.
Okay, Councillor Aitken.
There's two local members in particular, Paul Edbrook and also Sonia Kilkenny, who the waterway runs through their electorates, and I would expect that they be vocal about this in the interests of the general community and the health of the creek itself. and in the broader context of our environment. Mr Mayor, we need to be particularly careful because I don't think council should put itself in any position. I'm prepared to support this motion, but council should not put itself in any position which opens the door for the responsibility of Cannonook Creek's full management being devolved onto Frankston City Council, because that will cost millions and millions of dollars, and it would mean a shift of responsibility where currently it's held by the state onto a local council, and that's something that we need to be very, very careful of.
Councillor Bolam.
As seconder, I'll speak, Mr Mayor. What I like about this report is it's simplistic, and what I mean by that is it's divided into 3 quadrants. Firstly, it focuses on the creek mouth, the mouth of the creek, which has a large sediment build-up of sand. It also focuses on the governance arrangements that Councillor Aiken and Councillor Toms have spoken about. You might recall last year the state government offered council a very tokenistic amount of money. I think it was 30-odd thousand in exchange for taking over the management of the creek, which the council promptly said no thank you to. So that'll be addressed in this report. Also, something that Councillor Aiken and I have spoken about quite a bit is the siltation issues, which is something that occurs throughout the entirety of the creek and includes dumped rubbish, submerged materials and metals, and a lack of dredging. So I think all 3 of those aspects are focused on in this recommendation, and I'm looking forward to what Doug and Phil come back with next year in terms of a possible solution.
Any other councillor wish to speak on this issue? If not, Councillor Toms wish to sum up?
Mr Mayor, it's all been said.
Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Okay, the Frankston Art Board minutes.
Move.
Move Councillor Mayer, seconded Councillor O'Reilly. Councillors, you wish to speak on this item?
No.
No? Any other councillor wish to speak? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. 12.9, council representatives to the Mornington Peninsula and Western Port Biosphere. I understand there's an alternate motion that's been put up, which apparently was the original motion which Councillor McCormick brought to council. So do I have a mover of that? Moved by Councillor McCormick, seconded. Seconded Councillor Cunill. Councillor McCormick, Councillor McCunill, do you wish to speak to this?
I'll speak just quickly because obviously I'm a subject of the motion as well. Just to specify that I'm the council appointed delegate to the Mornington Peninsula and Western Port Biosphere Reserve Foundation Councillor Liaison Committee, which is quite a mouthful, and I'm glad I got it out at this time of the evening. At a recent Councillor Liaison Committee meeting, we appointed the director and alternate director. There are 5 councils involved across the biosphere, and the director will be Councillor David Gill from Mornington Peninsula Shire, with myself as an alternative director. The structure of this motion is basically to set up the idea of the Council Liaison Committee and what involvement Council will have with the Biosphere Foundation moving forward. So each of the 5 member councils will be moving the same motion.
Okay, any other councillor wish to speak to this item? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Item carried unanimously. Okay, we go on now. We missed item 13.2, always dealt with that. We'll go on to the rescission motion, which is 14.1. No?
12.10.
I beg your pardon. Sorry, 12.10. I missed that. Okay, do I have a mover at 12.10? Move Councillor Mayer. Seconded?
Second.
Seconded Councillor Toms. Councillor Mayer, Councillor Toms, do you wish to speak to this matter?
No.
No.
Councillor Cunill.
Can I just question, I guess. Is it possible, Mr CEO, that prior to the Mayor of the day and whoever else is going to the MAV State Council, that some information can be put together for the Mayor of the day so that he can actually speak? Are you going, eh? And Councillor Thoms can actually speak to these motions when they debate them in the at the State Council meeting. I had to do it last year. It was very difficult. We got everything through apart from, I think, one that I withdrew. So can that happen, please, to make it easier for the councillors?
Through you, Mr Mayor, to Councillor Coonill, yes, we would do that. Some of the motions are quite straightforward. Others will probably require officers to prepare some briefing notes in the event that the Mayor is asked to actually speak to the motion, and it is only the Mayor that can actually speak without the leave of the State Council for an officer and or an alternative. So the Mayor will be fully briefed.
Thank you. Councillor Bolam.
I just want to briefly touch on the motions that are going to be submitted to the State Council, and I note that last year that both papers ran stories on Frankston's advocacy re the state government. Actually, I believe even the Herald Sun did an article, and kudos to Councillor Coonill and Councillor Hampton for getting those motions through the State Council. This year we're proposing, I think, 10 motions, which is quite extraordinary for a council. Most councils on average usually might pull 1 or 2 up, but the fact we're putting 10 up on what are very diverse issues, I think that's great, and it goes to show that council is really lobbying on behalf of its residents. So the only other thing I would say is that probably 3 of those motions relate to the continued sense that there is a deep state or maybe bureaucratic overreach occurring. And I guess from my perspective, I'd like to briefly talk about that. I feel, as a councillor, and other councillors are free to disagree, that there is a gradual creep of unelected bureaucratic overreach in the democratic decision-making process, be it the federal, state or local. And I don't say that to disparage bureaucrats. Some of them, including those that are in the room tonight, do a great job. But in terms of their inclusion in the democratic process, there has to be a fine line drawn. And I know I'm not the only council that feels that way. We see it in state bureaucracy, we see it in federal bureaucracy, we even see it in local government, where there is confusion as to where the council and where the operational form. So from my angst to what is in writing, that's where I'm coming from. And I'm sure there are other councillors around this room that appreciate the role that public office holds in a healthy debate or in a healthy democracy.
Thank you. Any other councillors to speak to this? Councillor Mayer, do you want to sum up?
Yes, just to forewarn our delegate that we have a new MAV now, pretty much. We have a new president. The previous president sometimes didn't invite the mover to speak to a motion, and things could just go down without you even getting to have a say. I'm hoping that doesn't happen this time. The other thing to be aware of, which you can appeal, is that if other councils put up similar motions, they just roll it into one. And so if you think yours is a little bit different to the other ones, you actually can appeal that. But it's, yeah, they'll go, oh, that's just like the other ones, we're just going to move, and they'll choose one particular council's motion. So just be aware of that, and when you go to debate, and that, you know, if you're not happy with that happening, that you might ask for yours to be considered separately as well.
Okay, I now put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Okay, now we're item 14.1, which is a rescission motion. 13.1.
I'll move it, Mr Mayor.
God, I'm jumping forward. I want to get there quickly. Yes, $40. And oh dear. Okay, unemployment in Frankston. Okay, response to NOM 1312. Have I got a mover? Moving Councillor Bolam, seconded.
Second.
Councillor McCormick. Moved and seconded. Does moved and seconded wish to speak to this item?
Thank you. So this proposal actually came about during election time in 2016. I think it was myself and Councillor Toms. We were handing out vote cards outside the Mechanics Institute, and a lady came running up to us and she was very upset. Her daughter is disabled and can't find work, and she wanted to know whether council offered any work experience or apprenticeship programs, and myself and Councillor Toms, not being on the council, had no idea. And she's always stuck in my mind, and I wish that I got her details, but that was the genesis behind this initial notice of motion that has now come back as a report, that we try and provide residents in our municipality opportunities that may not be afforded in traditional workplaces. And that could be people with disabilities, it could be young people, it could be people that are long-term unemployed. In this instance, the officers have come back with a recommendation that we focus on young people, which makes sense considering that Frankston and the Mornington Peninsula have among the among the highest post-secondary education transference. So the report more or less states we'll come back to council in September and we'll provide you a model to go by. But on the basis of the work that's been done thus far, I'm happy with the recommendation.
Okay, do I have any other speakers on this? Councillor McCormick, no? Okay, Councillor Boland, wish to sum up?
No, Mr Mayor.
Okay, well, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. Now on to item 14.1.
Mr Mayor, I propose the rescission before us tonight.
Okay, moved Councillor Boland and seconded Councillor Aitken. Do you two councillors wish to speak to this item?
Sorry, is the rescission procedural? Or
No, it's not.
I will speak to it, thank you, Mr Mayor. So this was no surprise. I did state at the last council meeting that I would be lodging a rescission, and this is what we have before us tonight. It was raised due to my concern that the concerns of the residents who Councillor Aiken, Councillor O'Connor, the CEO and myself met with last month were not fully captured in the original report to council. This is a real issue that requires a proactive response from council, and I note that councillors, not last week, the week before, there was another issue that emanated from the Apsley Place site that required officer intervention. So the issues haven't been resolved; they are still ongoing. And as I said, we need to really provide the residents of Apsley Place with a proactive approach. For those that may not be aware, in 2014, the business started operating at the Apsley Place location without a permit, and what's happened is a range of amenity issues and safety issues have occurred. The amenity issues include a barking dog that constantly barks day and night, the unsightliness of the property, a lack of engagement from the owner, and the health and safety issues include an unknown airborne chemical that smells, and a number of residents have reported having dizzy fits as a result of it, unknown chemicals being dispersed into drainage, stainings of the soil with unknown chemical substance outside of the property. There's a whole range of issues that we've already gone over from the last council meeting. So, as I said, I raised the rescission because I didn't feel the council response in that report reflected the extreme situation that the residents are experiencing, and I'm hoping that tonight we can rectify the decision of council from its last meeting.
Councillor Aitken. Any other councillors wish to speak to this? Councillor Mayer.
Can I ask a question? Obviously this was narrowly defeated last time and with certain reasons. So I'm just wondering if the officers have any ideas on how to improve our relationship with the EPA and if that's possible. That was one of my things. I thought that was a bit, you know.
Through you, Mr Mayor, the officers had been working with EPA and we had agreed to regular meetings
it certainly had opened up the dialogue. They have employed a communications manager for this area of the state, and he seemed very committed to continue to work with us to improve any of the glitches or what seems to be hindrances or hold-ups that might be being experienced.
So basically, if this goes ahead, the report would just reflect that advice that you've just given, that's what's happening. I have another question, and that is with the existing factories and businesses. I mean, that's kind of separate to this particular application. Have we got that information, whether all factories and businesses have permits? Like, is that audit necessary?
So that would require greater definition. So, for example, not every industry in an industrial zone requires a planning permit. This was in a buffer area, so that's where the requirement came. So we would need to sort of define the focus group of which premises fall into the category of requiring a permit, and we could check those. Alternatively, it could be a much bigger audit of all businesses, and including ones that don't necessarily need a permit.
Okay, because I'm still opposed to this on the basis that this could be really labour intensive and quite costly, because that sounds like that Part B is actually very broad. So I think that either needs to be taken out or reworded as a suggestion to the mover and seconder. Yeah, obviously, like I said, I voted against this for a reason. You know, I understand the intent. If there's been one person doing the wrong thing, there could be others. I think that's probably, you know, what you were getting at. But I'm just wondering if there is anyone who has a suggestion for better wording.
Yep.
I have a question to Dr. Gillian Kay. I got sent some information this evening, which I've emailed on to other councillors. The only one that didn't get it is Councillor Aitken, in regards to the cost of this. Could you outline what the maximum cost would be, and what would the minimum cost be if we took up this rescission motion?
Through you, Mr Mayor, yes, to the best of our ability, this relates particularly to 6B and 6E. We know that we have 10,000 businesses. We think up to about 6,000 may be caught up in this, depending on the definition that Mike Papagiorgio has outlined just previously. On that basis, and taking a proactive approach to doing audits and inspections at least once a year, you'd need 6 staff to do that. So you're talking about $600,000 per year to do that, with 120,000 in vehicles and recurrent of 50,000 maintenance for those vehicles. You'd need some admin support, software support for doing red flags in the system, so you have the capacity to follow up on each inspection that was done where there were issues found. Sampling costs, I've had advice today from EPA, are very expensive, and they're suggested making allowance of about 150,000. Equipment costs in the first year for buying laptops, monitoring equipment and testing equipment, and mobile phones, and then some training costs for each of the officers every year as well. So the maximum costs would be about $1.1 million for year 1, and about 888 thereafter to maintain that service. But it needs to be pointed out, Mr Mayor, that this is a proactive cost. There may be no real issues out there. You're doing annual inspections like we do with food premises, whereas at the moment EPA and ourselves actually follow up where complaints are actually made, and that's the difference.
And the other end, what was the
at the lower end, and it's still doing proactive work, but taking about 10 cases a year, which would be fairly labour intensive. It'd be one EFT, 100,000, a vehicle at 20 plus 9,000 per annum maintenance costs, about 0.4 of an EFT for administrative support. You'd still need the software support with the red flag systems and some recurrent funding there for maintenance. Sampling costs were reduced to 25,000, recurrent equipment costs 25,000 one-off, and training costs of about 4. That all comes to about 234,000 a year at the first year, and 168,000 recurrent.
Thank you. Councillor Boland, question?
So you mentioned 6,000 properties could be caught up in this. What do you mean by that? What, without permits?
We've got just over 10,000 businesses, and they're all categorised. That comes out of REM plan in economic development. You take out categories like real estate businesses, administrative support businesses, health, allied health businesses, etc., and you can reduce the number of businesses that you might have to go out and do inspections on. That takes it down to roughly 6,000 businesses. So they might be factories, manufacturing, mining, of which we do have some, construction, etc., and so on, that you would actually go and do those inspections on.
Thank you.
Councillor Toms.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ever so briefly, I do support this as it's a report. However, the costs seem to be just going up and up and up and up, and I'm not sure I can support the kind of expenditure that is needed. However, I understand the intent of the rescission motion. It's well-meaning, and yes, there are issues, severe issues with the Aspley Place situation, and really the EPA needs to be taking more of a role and a focus and a responsibility than council, and council shouldn't really be having to take that role on. So I will support this. However, as it's a report, no money will actually be being spent at this time. However, my question to officers through you, Mr. Mayor, is can a range of different financial options be workshopped, high end, middle end, low end, like you just identified, with EFT expenditure, and that's the money that this will cost council, and include that into the report? Because right now all I'm hearing is this level, when there's probably a few different levels of expenditure that we can use with this situation. So is somebody able to answer that?
You, Mr. Mayor, it may be possible, but we'd have to categorise businesses and make selections where at the moment the wording is broad. We'd have to narrow it in a bit more so we can give some range of suggestions and options in the report, yes.
I think that would be helpful, as it is very broad and wide-reaching, and there are many businesses that would be caught up in this precinct in our community. So yes, I will support it, but I have my reservations.
Okay, do I have any other councillors wish to speak to this?
If we can't come up with some different wording, can I move a deferral?
I'm not supporting any wording. I think we've heard from the officers they're happy to workshop it. That's good enough for me.
Can you move? I'm not sure. Can we move
a deferral?
or not? Right? Yeah, well, you can move a procedural motion that it be deferred.
Well, I'll move deferral.
Moved by Councillor. I know. Hang on. Hold on. We'll just go to the almanac.
It does say if it's not moved at the meeting at which it is listed
Yeah, it is. It is silent. It's really the decision is mine, but bearing in mind the intent of the rescission, which was to be brought up at this meeting, I can't move a deferral because of the intent that the mover and seconder and also the third person that signed the rescission. I don't think it'd be fair on them to hold it over. You just need to, if you want to, you have to vote against it. So, okay, Councillor Aiken.
Yeah, look, I think that does need to be clarified, and I think that everybody has heard the conversation, and so I think we know where we're going with that one. The wording in that particular instance is unfortunate. The intent is clear. I also have to say that with respect of projected costs, we need to keep our mind on the subject rather than follow different paths. And the fact is that we've only had this one instance in a long, long time where there's basically been an industry that has had significant impact upon adjoining residents in a long, long time. So I don't think that we're going to be running around all over the place looking for problems. I think that's the base issue of the real intent. As far as businesses go, I think that probably was an unfortunate inclusion. We are dealing in this instance, or have been dealing with in this instance, with a factory situation, and the impact of its activities on nearby residents is very clear and very real. There is, to my mind, and I have knowledge probably of three problem areas in that whole Hartnett estate. Three. The other two are not as difficult and not as involved as the Apsley Place one, but nonetheless they are having direct impact on residents' well-being and the amenity of the area, and that will probably need to be addressed aside from this meeting, I would think, would be the appropriate course. So that the general intent of the motion is quite good, and I think as far as improving relations between council and the EPA goes, well, I think what really needs to be there is a better communication stream, because I find it quite alarming that liquids continued to be spilled into our drainage system and raised by residents to EPA without it being attended to. And that obviously means that we need to have better communication linkages with the EPA, and I'd support that entirely. So overall, I have no problem with the motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other councillors wish to speak to this? If there are no other councillors, I will have something to say. I got forwarded the information only very late today from Dr. Gillian Kay in regards to the cost. But the problem, the problem is a real problem. It's over $1 million one end and recurrent over 880,000. If it's the other end, it's still 234,000 and 168,000 recurrent. But the problem is the notice of motion. The notice of motion is far too complex, it's far too broad, and it's not at all clear. And because of that, all these costs are going to come up. My recommendation would be that you vote against this motion and the mover go away and sit down and write out a more simpler motion, being more specific in the areas that he wants to be looked at, and we all agree about the problems in Apsley Place. But this your rescission motion, councillor, unfortunately, is just too broad. And I would, if you went away and you come back with something which was a little more succinct, a little more to the point, so as we can cost it and be able to run it as a council, I'd have no problem. But unfortunately, because of that, I'm going to have to vote against this motion. Councillor Mayor.
Question.
Okay.
So I think there's some support for going on this because it's just a report, even though of the costs. But it actually, from numbers 4 and 5, that we're actually saying just go and send letters out. So one of them is letters to all residents and ratepayers within the proximity of Absolute Place, which is probably not many. Then there's one that says all factories and businesses within close proximity to residential properties be reminded in the form of a mail out of their obligations in relation to Frankston City Council and EPA rules and regulations. How many businesses and what is that going to cost? Because this is saying we're just going to go and do that and we're going to do a report. So there's the cost of the report, the time of the officers, which isn't going to be massive just to write a report, but what is the cost of the mail out, which it seems councillors some are in support of actually doing right now as this motion stands.
Through you, Mr Mayor, at the moment we don't actually know. We'll do a scan of the city in terms of which areas have proximity to residential developments, and I think it probably is likely to be affordable and not too much of an issue, but at the moment I couldn't be specific.
Okay, as there's no other councillors, Councillor Bolam, could you, oh, I didn't see you down there, your little hand is so small, I didn't see it. I might have to get you one of those red flags, you know, that the train lines have.
Can I have a flashing light?
A flashing light, perhaps, sorry.
A little disco ball or something. All right, look, I'm supportive of the rescission motion. I'm supportive of the intent of the motion. At the end of the day, it's calling for a report, and to the extent that there's any inconsistency with what's being asked for, then it's a simple conversation that's being had between the officers and the mover of the motion to resolve any sort of inconsistencies or any questions that anyone might have. I'm also mindful of the fact that we seem to be debating the intention of moving the next motion and not the rescission itself. So that's something else. The motion, the rescission motion, as I spoke on at the last meeting, effectively is a do nothing approach by council, and what we're really saying is that we want council to do more than nothing. It's not enough to follow up with the EPA. We need to be more proactive about that for our community. The councillors that attended the community meeting certainly got that loud and clear from the members of their community, and therefore I'll support the ward councillors and what their community members have requested of them. So I've got no issues with anything that's before us.
Thank you. Councillor Bolam, would you sum up?
Thank you. I'll just read through aspects of the motion so councillors are aware on what they're voting on. So the first three are the first three recommendations of the original report. Then it's asked that a letter be sent to all residents and ratepayers, advising them of any updates at 30 days and 90 days. So whether there is actually a VCAT challenge and what the outcome of that challenge may be. I think given how long this has been going on for, since 2014, that's a reasonable request. There is then another request that a mail out be done to factories and businesses within close proximity to residential properties, so a buffer zone, be sent out. And from what I've just heard, it doesn't sound like that's going to be an overly difficult task. Then there is the request that the CEO provide a report to council on some reforms that could be undertaken to ensure that hopefully this doesn't happen again. And I need to reinforce to councillors how serious this has been. This has affected people's lives. It's affected the market value of their homes. It's created consternation between neighbours and businesses. It's been a real terrible scenario for the people of Absolute Place and the surrounding areas. So please don't forget that. And if you heard the emotion coming from those voices that we heard at that public meeting, you would understand how emotive this is to many of those residents. So that's what we're asking. We're asking the CEO to go away and come back with a report on perhaps some mechanisms that could be enacted to reflect their concerns. And finally, we ask that the number 7, which is on the back, we ask that the state government take a greater interest in this issue and use this as a case study to ensure that the EPA is more proactive in the future, because in this case, in my opinion, they failed in their duty. I think it's easy just to focus on my ward, our ward, but what I've done in this motion is attempt to make it broad, because this is an issue that shouldn't just be exclusive to our ward. This should be something that all ward councillors of all wards should be worried about. And I don't want to see repetition of Apsley Place occur in another part of the city. The people of Frankston don't deserve that. We owe it to our residents in Apsley Place to bring these issues to the fore, which we've done tonight. And I think we've been as proactive as possible. And whatever the report comes back with, whether it's uber expensive or it's too complicated, so be it. But I think we owe it to those residents, given how long they've waited for this problem to be rectified. We owe it to them to bring these issues up for consideration.
Okay, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Lillian O'Connor, Councillor Bolam, Councillor Aiken, Councillor Toms, Councillor McCormack. Those against? Councillor Hampton, Councillor Cunill, Councillor Mayer and Councillor O'Reilly. That motion is carried. And at what cost?
Mr Mayor, hello? The motion's been passed, we don't need those comments.
Well, I'm talking to myself, I'm allowed to do that. Okay, next motion, which is 14.2, National and International Accreditation.
Yep, I'll move.
Move Councillor Bolam, seconded.
Yes.
Seconded Councillor Toms, in the nick of time. Okay, councillors, do you wish to debate this?
I will, and for these motions, given how late it is, I won't be providing retorts. I'll just give the initial summary. This motion I put together due to the fact that, as we know, Frankston is still experiencing something of a image problem, both internally and externally. I'd love to see the image of Frankston bolstered, which is why I've recommended a number of accreditations that could be put to Frankston's name to improve the image of Frankston, not just externally but also internally. What I appreciate about these accreditations is each accreditation has certain expectations and undertakings, which I hope that a report back to council will explore in more detail. What I would hope to see from a report is how these accreditations could impact the municipality, not just internally within council, but externally on a wider perceptive level of understanding. And this could improve, this could include branding, the city branding itself in a more positive light, and also more practical on the ground improvements. So from that perspective, this is why I've proposed this motion tonight, for a report to come back and to explore whether all or some or one or none of those accreditations might be worth pursuing.
Okay, are there any other councillors? Councillor Toms.
Yes, Mr Mayor, just briefly, I commend the councillor on the organisations which is chosen for council to perhaps become accredited with. They are very good international organisations, some of them, and I am interested to see where this goes. The question I have to the officers through you, Mr Mayor, is the cost that has been assigned to this, at 1 year being approximately $1,500. How is that broken down?
Sorry, through you, Mr Mayor, that's not broken down. That's the cost of preparing the report and doing
That's
the
just the
investigation.
report.
Yeah.
So what do you suspect the costings will come?
Well, through you, Mr Mayor, I know that, for instance, White Ribbon Workplace Accreditation is about $10,000 a year, and there's quite a lot of organisational change that has to be accommodated,
Yeah,
which would
okay.
come at extra, and that's one.
That's
I
just one.
couldn't actually tell you what all the rest of them are without that investigation.
Thank you. As it's just a report, I will be I will support it, but I'd be interested to see what some of these costs come back as, because yes, this could be very cost intensive. So I support the initiative. It's well-meaning, and it is increasingly about the image of Frankston. So Councillor Bolam knows I support increasing the positive image of Frankston. So I support the entirely.
Okay, Councillor Cunill.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Well, Mr Mayor, I'm not quite as enthusiastic about any of this. This was raised from memory, or parts of this motion, back in the first term of council that I was involved in between 2008 and 2012, and I think at the time Councillor Bolam raised some of these organisations as organisations that council should possibly align themselves with. I think it's an absolute waste of time. I don't see any benefit at all in officers preparing a report, and the reason I say that is because it's my understanding that all of these organisations will be costly if we're going to seek accreditation. You don't just write to these organisations and send them a cheque. These organisations, because I can remember the report that came back to council, and council didn't adopt it those few years back. As well as a cost, there's a whole heap of conditions that council have to meet, and from memory, council didn't support it last time. As I said, it was between 2008 and 2012 simply because of the cost. But at the end of the day, who really cares if we've got World Health Organisation, Safe City accreditation? Who really cares if we've got accreditation from Fair Trade Association of Australia, New Zealand Fair Trade Council? Who cares? It's like Nutella, or I think it's Nutella, have the Heart Foundation tick of approval. Well, big deal. It costs them a heap of money to have that. I don't see any benefit in this at all, and I think it's a waste of council officers' time in even looking at this. I can't support it. I won't support it. I know it's only a report, but I can't support a report coming back to council if ultimately I'm not going to support any of these being involved in any of the accreditations. So,
Okay.
Sorry, can't do it.
Thank you, Councillor Cunill. Councillor Aiken.
Well, I note that whilst Councillor Cunill can't support it and won't support it, I will support it and can support it. And I don't see any reason why anyone shouldn't. Because it's asking for a report investigating the accreditation for the following schemes. And as far as I'm concerned, I'd be very happy if the World Health Organisation accredited Frankston as a safe city. I'd also be very happy if the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, declared us a child-friendly city. And I think, personally, that to have tags on your city of that nature would bring good esteem and good standing. And Frankston has had too many criticisms aimed against it, which are very unfair and very uneducated, and frequently from people that haven't even visited the place. I think this has got a lot of pluses, and I don't mind the idea of having a report done to see exactly what might be involved. And at that point in time, I would make a balanced decision about the proposals individually. But I'm certainly not going to knock out the opportunity of us knowing better what might be involved in having a better and more prestigious label on our city.
Thank you. Any other Councillor Mayer?
Yes, I do remember the first council I was on, and Councillor Bolam did indeed raise, I think it was the first two, and we decided not to do it because it was going to cost way too much money. And unless that's changed, it's still going to cost too much money. I don't really see what it achieves. You know, I know that with White Ribbon, look, I've had quite a bit to do with family violence organisations, and I know that there have been a number of celebrity sporting people who have gone and become ambassadors or thrown some money at White Ribbon. I think even when there was all that scandal with Eddie Maguire, I think he had a fundraiser for White Ribbon or something like that. Whoops, because he made a comment about drowning a female sports reporter or something like that. So, you know, White Ribbon, we've had councillors and I think officers who have been possibly ambassadors in the first council that I was in, but I'm not sure that actually achieves anything. All you need is, you know, all the hard work that we do, all you need is some idiot comedian to go and crack a joke like happened when Darryl Taylor was mayor and we were at the Bully Zero dinner. We had booked an entire table. We paid a fortune to be there. And they got up and made a crack about Frankston. We were furious, you know. And then you'll get someone who makes a video, it goes on YouTube and goes viral, you know, and there's, you know, a lot of negative stuff, which is why we started Frankston TV. But it's so much easier, you know, for the bad stuff to get out there than the good stuff. I mean, I'm not sure if this really achieves anything. Why would we not do it? Why would we not have our officers write another report? Let me tell you why. It's right here in the comments. Staff are considerably stretched with the number of notices of motions and reports currently being sought. This would take considerable research to understand the ongoing obligations, costs, impact of required change to meet individual accreditation status and whether there are likely to be any conflicts between the separate accreditations. That's why I don't support it.
Thank you. Any other councillors? No other councillors? Well, I'll have a say about this. At the end of the day, perhaps we should put in a G, that we join the Sasono Friendship Association and put that as a G. But I know that's not going to happen. I can't believe that we keep getting these notices of motion, which are reports, which cost us money, and we know at the end of the day that when the reports come back, as we've been told by our officers, this is going to cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars. We have councillors in here that walk the walk, but as far as I know, they don't talk the talk in regards to council expenditure. And there would be a lot of money involved in this.
Mr Mayor.
A lot of money involved in this.
Point of order.
I'm not, councillor, I'm not accepting your point of order, okay? I'm not
down.
accepting it. If you pursue this, I'll ask you to leave the chamber.
No, that's okay.
Okay, right.
I'm moving,
Okay.
moving dissent against the chair.
What's-
I bet you
what's-
to it. It's procedural.
Listen, before you do that, I'm asking
I've
you to
already
leave
done
the
it.
chamber. I've already done that.
done it, Mr.
Under
Mayor.
section.
I second the motion of dissent.
Well, it's too late. I've already moved my motion.
No, I don't
Okay.
think you have.
It's too late.
Second the motion of dissent.
It's too late.
No, it isn't.
Under 91, removal from the chair because you didn't adhere to my ask to not move a notice of that you did. But I'm now asking you now to leave the chamber for an hour.
Mr Federico, you might want to correct the mayor on the procedural motion. I actually got the mayor before he got...
It's too late. I already said to you
It's a procedural
before you.
motion.
I already said to you before that you can leave.
You are on film, Mr Mayor. I'll remind you, you are on film.
That's fine. That's fine. Yeah.
Mr Mayor, section 88, the chair may remove, the chair may order and cause the removal of any person, including a councillor, who disrupts any meeting or fails to comply with the direction or cause. So you have to first give the reason why you're actually asking the council to leave before you then invoke.
Well, okay. Well, the reason is
Section
that
91.
What was it?
I move a motion of dissent, Mr Mayor.
I said that I wouldn't accept your point of order, and I asked you to desist from doing it. You didn't desist. So because of that, under the section 88 as well, I'm asking you to leave the chamber.
Well, I'm moving a motion of dissent against you.
Well, too late.
No, I am going to now, because
Well,
it's
you
not
have to
too
leave
late.
the
I can
chamber.
do that
That's fine.
now. You cannot take that away from me. I'm sorry. You are on film, Mr Mayor. I will remind you. I am
Okay.
moving a motion of dissent
Right,
against
you need to leave
you.
the chamber. No, that's the motion of dissent comes after you leave the chamber.
It does.
And I said an hour.
I move a motion of dissent against you, Mr Mayor.
You can do that?
And I've done it.
Yeah, that's fine.
I second the motion of dissent, Mr Mayor, against you.
Okay, I'll get out of the chair.
can I ask a question?
Through you, Madam Deputy New Councillor Mayor, the Deputy Mayor must now undertake a ruling on the motion of dissent.
Mover, please state your reason why for the motion dissent.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. The reason I have moved a motion of dissent against the Mayor of Frankston City is because a councillor of this council called a point of order. That point of order was not even heard. That councillor did not even get the chance to articulate properly that point of order. And the Mayor refused to hear it. And I believe that a mayor or a chair, any responsible person chairing a meeting, is required and should rightfully hear what a point of order is before dismissing a person from the room because they fail to stay quiet when they've been asked to leave in that context.
Thank you, Councillor Aiken. Please state your response.
My response to that is I asked the councillor when he moved the point of order not to do so because, in my opinion, it was moved to disrupt me speaking. I asked him not to move that point of order and he refused. And as a consequence, under Section 88 of the Local Government Act, our local law, I asked him to withdraw from the meeting. I did not want him to move the point of order because it was only just to disrupt my debate.
Thank you. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour of motion of dissent, please put your hand up. Councillor Aiken, Councillor Toms, Councillor McCormick. All those who oppose the motion of dissent. Councillor O'Connor, Councillor Hampton, Councillor Kerniel, Councillor Mayer and Councillor O'Reilly. The motion of dissent not carried.
Okay, councillors. Now I want you to come to order, okay? And we'll continue debate. And the debate is on national and international accreditation. And I was part of the way through it before I was interrupted in my debate. And councillors, I just behave. I just want you both to just behave, okay? Both of you. And unfortunately, what happens, we get these constant notices of motion that cost our officers time and effort to bring them up, only to know at the end of the day, the cost is going to be prohibitive. I mean, the previous motion is the same. It is very, very prohibitive. But anyway, that's why, councillors, I am not going to vote for a national and international accreditation. Because we all know at the end of the day, it costs a lot of money, and to what benefit for this city? This city could spend their money in a lot better ways than accrediting themselves to these organisations. Money's being spent left, right and centre here, and not enough account being made of it. So, in my opinion, you should vote against it. Okay, now as the mover has been taken out of the chamber. Are any other councillors wish to speak to this? If not, I'll move the motion. All those in favour? Councillor Aiken, Councillor Toms. Do you know what you're voting on, Councillor? Do you want me to repeat the motion? Okay. Councillor McCormick. Those against? Councillor Hampton, Councillor O'Connor, Councillor Cuniel, Councillor Sandra Mayer, Councillor Michael O'Reilly. That motion is lost. Okay, Seaford Wetlands. Well, Councillor Bolam. Okay, moved by Councillor Aitken.
I'll second.
Okay, moved by Councillor Aitken. Okay. All right, Councillor Aitken, Councillor... who seconded that? Councillor Mayer, was it?
No, you didn't. Oh,
listen.
really? Oh, goodness. What? Dear oh me.
Okay,
Dear oh
councillors, Councillors, okay,
Oh, goodness.
just calm down, all right?
Councillor
So, so who moved that then? Councillor
I moved it.
McCormick, okay. Councillor Aiken, Councillor McCormick, do you want to talk to this motion?
Yes, I will. Mr Mayor, the Seaford wetlands, there is a major issue regarding particularly motorbikes, motorised vehicles, causing major problems for pedestrians in particular, as well as the environmental damage that they do on the wetlands when they get in to the area. So I think that it is not a bad thing to have a meeting, and in fact there hasn't been a meeting about the wetlands area for a very, very long time, to discuss the various issues surrounding the wetlands, including the antisocial behaviour, which is in fact the mini bikes that keep emerging. I believe, unless I'm wrong, Council does not desire to see mini bikes in our public reserves and open spaces, and I believe that Council should have a reasonably strong opinion on the illegal riding of motorised vehicles in areas where pedestrians are walking. We have had one resident, as some of you would well know, who has repeatedly been somewhat besieging councillors with communications about the mini bike issue in the Seaford area, particularly where he is, adjoining the wetlands. I think it's appropriate, it's reasonable, and it's something that doesn't cost any money.
Okay, Councillor McCormick.
Yeah, this is a calling for a meeting of all interested parties. It's not dissimilar to other motions that we've had before the chamber. One that immediately springs to mind is the Pines Flora and Fauna Reserve, and it's useful to have these kinds of meetings and to establish relationships and try and improve on practices. The meeting that was organised for the Pines Flora and Fauna Reserve was obviously an area that's not managed by Frankston Council, but the Seaford wetlands are under the auspice of Frankston Council, so it makes sense to act in relation to this matter. I can't see really any reason why anyone would oppose it. Really, it's calling for a meeting of interested parties, and then a report back to council on the outcomes of the meeting. It's pretty innocuous in my view.
Okay, any other councillors wish to? Councillor Cunill.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I suppose it's fair to try and articulate to the councillors why I'm opposed. I'm not opposed at all to having a meeting with Ms Kilkenny, the state member for Carrum. I haven't got a problem with Melbourne Water going. I haven't got a problem with Victoria Police going. There appears to be issues around antisocial behaviour within the Seaford wetlands, and that's sad. The Victoria Police are the ones that need to get involved. If there's people who are concerned, residents who are concerned, other parties, they need to report the issues to Victoria Police. My basis of opposing this is just a notice of motion that doesn't need, or it's a notice of motion, it does not need to be a notice of motion. We don't need to spend council time deciding whether it's a good idea to have a meeting with Sonia Kilkenny, Melbourne Water, appropriate representatives of any liaison committees, and the Victoria Police. We don't need a notice of motion. I'm going to ask a question now. Is it true, Dr Kay, that your officers from the Compliance and Safety Department have regular meetings with Victoria Police? I think it's every second Monday, to talk about any concerns that our city has.
Through you, Mr Mayor, yes, that's correct. We have a police liaison meeting every couple of weeks.
I believe it's every fortnight on a Monday or Tuesday, whatever day it is, but every fortnight, Dr Kay?
Yes, that's correct.
Mr Mayor and councillors, that's the reason for opposing this notice of motion. And I opposed it the other day at the pre-agenda meeting, Councillor Bolam, who raised this, said that he had issues with Sonia Kilkenny not wishing to meet with him. Well, that's fine, but why do you need to embroil the council in it? Why do the council need to say, you will meet with the council? We don't need to go down this track. Go and organise your meeting, North West Ward councillors, go and organise it. I'm happy for you to go, but don't bring it into the chamber and waste council time on it. This does not need to be a notice of motion.
Thank you. Any other councillors? No other councillors? Councillor Aitken, you mind summing up?
Yes, look, I actually agree. It probably needn't have been put in the form of a notice of motion on that basis, as Councillor Cuneo has pointed out. However, the sheer reality is, Mr Mayor, we've got it here tonight, and the proposal is reasonable, and I would think it would be particularly sour if council simply voted it down because they considered it shouldn't or could have been otherwise than a notice of motion. I agree, it could have been done without a notice of motion, but to vote it down simply because now it's on the agenda and we've discussed the matter would be puerile, to say the least.
Okay, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Councillor Elaine O'Connor, Councillor Aitken, Councillor Toms and Councillor Quinn McCormick. Those against? Councillor Hampton, Councillor Cunha, Councillor Mayer, Councillor O'Reilly. I will cast my casting vote and vote that down. So that is lost.
Advocacy, and this is actually a very important issue.
They are all very important issues.
Mr Mayor, this is an issue that has been going on. So I'm moving the motion.
Okay. Councillor Aitken, you've moved it. Councillor Toms has seconded it.
The motion.
Do you both want to debate this?
Yeah, I want to speak.
Okay.
I want to address it.
All right. Okay.
That on the basis that the Seaford RSL is located on state government-owned land and that the Seaford RSL are intending to upgrade its facilities, and Council is to formally request in conjunction with the Seaford RSL, the State Member for Carrum, who's the appropriate State Member, Ms Sonia Kilkenny, to provide bona fide or greater clarity on the future of the Seaford RSL at its present site. And they do need greater clarity. They have been talking about this for a long time. It is a source of worry to them. I have said to them that politically it would be very unwise, I think, for any government of any colour to remove them or terminate their tenure. But that doesn't change the fact that they are they don't feel secure. And that issue has been going now for some years, and I think we need to try and do something to get greater clarity about it. So I think it's fair.
Okay, Councillor Toms.
I'll reserve my right, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Mayer and then Councillor Cunha.
I have a question. Didn't we approve for some works to be done in the past couple of years on Seaford RSL? So at that time, were there any concerns about state government taking that land off them?
Through you, Mr Mayor, we understand that it's actually part of the rail reserve, and should there be a third railway line, that some of that land might be required.
Okay, so they're thinking it'll be a waste of money to do it if the land is taken off them? Is that the concern? If that land is like what's happening now, so they're legitimate concerns? Okay.
Okay, Councillor Keenill.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Well, I've got bad news again. Look, I understand the Seaford RSL have been there for a number of years. I was going to ask some questions about the rail corridor, but Dr Coe's indicated that the Seaford RSL currently occupy part of the rail reserve. The way this notice of motion is worded, it suggests that Council should, and in conjunction with the Seaford RSL, approach the State Member for Carrum, Ms Sonia Kilkenny, asking her to make sure, unless I'm reading this wrong, make sure that into the future the Seaford RSL will be able to stay on the land that they're currently occupying. I don't know how anyone can possibly agree, how any member of parliament, any council could say with any degree of certainty that yes, you can stay there for a number of years, because for as long as I've been on this earth, state government and interested parties have talked about a third railway line to Melbourne from Frankston. It's my understanding that the Seaford RSL actually, we know they occupy the land that's owned by VicTrack, but it's my understanding that if there was a third line built, if and when, from Frankston to Melbourne, then it would mean whatever part of the building the Seaford RSL has on that land, it would need to be gone. So I'll support this notice of motion, but only on the condition that we are only asking for clarity, because if a letter sent urging or asking Ms Kilkenny to consider or to make a commitment to allow Seaford RSL to stay there indefinitely, then she can't do that. No one's going to do that. So I'll support this reluctantly, but I think in future notices of motion have to be very cleverly worded, because this is unclear. You're asking for clarity, and if Sonia Kilkenny comes back and says, well, sorry, you currently have a lease to 2025, but we might start building that third railway line in 2026, well, you know, what are we asking for? I haven't got anything further to say on it.
Any other councillor wish to end a debate on this? Councillor?
Just briefly to say, I mean, look at Frankston Tennis Club, classic example. Like, sorry guys, yeah, you've got a lease, but we're kicking you off well before that expires because we want to expand the hospital. So, you know, she can say, look, right now there's no plans, or she might say we may have plans for the future, but this isn't necessarily going to achieve anything. So where does that leave the club? They're still going to be in limbo about what do we, you know, expand further. You know, I'd like to see them stay if that's where they want to stay. Obviously, why would you put members' money into expansion if it's all going to get ripped up? The reality is, yeah, no one can provide that guarantee. So it's not going to achieve anything, but yeah.
Any councillor? Any councillor? I'd just like to say this, that the Seaford RSL have already been in talks with Miss Kilkenny, and they were in talks with her some time ago. So really, for us to be going into talks again, which have already occurred, I can't see really any sense in it. I really don't. We can lend our support to them, but they have already started negotiations with Kilkenny, and like councillors have said, there's no way that any member of parliament can give a guarantee when a section of land has been set aside for a third rail. I mean, at the end of the day, they can't. It's impossible. But we can always lend our support. They should have actually probably changed the notice of motion to say that we support the RSL in their attempts to secure tenure. I don't know if someone wants to change the motion that way, and then I would vote for it. Councillor Cunill.
Mr Mayor, I'd like just to ask a question, just to clarify. You mentioned that the Seaford RSL and Ms Kilkenny have been negotiating this for some time now.
Well, they've been talking to her about it.
Well, if that's the case, it's not in this. I wasn't aware of that, so I indicated that I would support this, but I'm not going to now. Not if they're already in discussions. I don't see any point in council getting involved in it. Leave it up to the state government and the RSL. We can support them, but we don't need to write. I have a question.
Yes, councillor, I have a question.
Do you know the exact nature of those discussions?
No, I don't.
Nor do I as a ward councillor, Mr Mayor.
I don't, but they have been in discussions with them. No, we don't. We don't. Okay, any other councillor?
That's a good question, Mr Mayor, and maybe best to ask you. You were talking about changing the motion to say that we support Seaford RSL. Does that mean that we support them staying and not having a third rail line?
Well, I just support them
think
for the,
about that.
for the tenure that they require, but unfortunately, if the rail line comes through, that tenure will end.
Yeah. So would we be in almost accidentally forming a position of saying, no, we want the RSL to stay rather than having a third line? Because if it seems to be that certain that a third railway means they're going to go, you're basically saying, no, we support the RSL staying, which means we don't support a third rail line. So it's probably better to leave it as it is.
Yeah, well, I'll leave it as it is. Okay, any other councillor? Councillor Aitken.
There does need to be greater clarity. Now, I don't know the nature of the discussions that have taken place. I do know that they have indicated their concern about the future of their location. I don't know what the nature of those discussions have been. I don't know what the response has been. But I do think that a combined approach with council expressing a degree of interest would be helpful. They are in a bind because they have considered making some significant improvements to the building, but there's always the concern that at some future stage it may just all be pulled down, or they may be relocated. So it is a bind for them. It may be that in the discussions, at least one of the things that can be asked for is simply, is there any future plan that we don't know of at all in 20 years' time that's likely we're going to be shifted, so that at least they've got something to deal with and work around and plan with.
Thank you, councillor. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Hampton, Councillor Lillian O'Connor, Councillor Aitken, Councillor Toms, Councillor Mayer, Councillor McCormick. All those against? Councillor Cunill and Councillor O'Reilly. That motion's carried. I need a mover for an extension of time. Move Councillor Aitken, second Councillor Cunill. All those in favour? Carried. Okay, NOM 2018-7 MON 17. Support neighbourhood house funding. Councillor McCormick?
I'll move.
Moved and seconded. Moved by Councillor McCormick, seconded Councillor Bolam. Do you... Oh, that's 50. Councillor Cunill. Do you two councillors wish to... Yep, okay. Councillor McCormick.
I, along with some other councillors, have been contacted for support by our neighbourhood houses in the municipality. The neighbourhood houses are looking for support for their campaign to increase their budgeted funding in the state government next round of budget proposals. They haven't had an increase in funding since 2014 under the previous coalition government, despite an election commitment from the current Labor government, which has yet to bear fruit. In an average week, the Victorian neighbourhood houses provide over 10,000 opportunities for around 188,000 people. They deliver programs, respond to issues such as digital literacy and inclusion, supporting disengaged youth, unemployment, childcare, emergency management, food security, community resilience, family violence, mental health and wellbeing, training and education, integration of new arrivals and refugee communities, rural isolation, supporting older Victorians. They have offender programs, social enterprise development and community connectedness. Obviously, with increases in operations over the last 4 years, our neighbourhood houses are struggling to meet their requirements and continue to fund themselves into the future. They are looking for increases in their house coordination program funding, an increase in the number of state government funded neighbourhood houses in Victoria. There's around 35 houses across Victoria that aren't actually funded at all, and and an increase in support for the neighbourhood house networks. And there is the Community Neighbourhood House Network in Coringal Drive, which is the network for the southern region. So basically this is just about writing to the Minister requesting that they look at increasing funding for neighbourhood houses, and also providing some social media coverage of council's decision to support neighbourhood houses to try and increase their funding. It's a service that they offer that council doesn't have to offer, and you know, helps with our community building. That's very
On the bell. Councillor.
Mr Mayor, I'd like to say something, but I'm mindful of the time. It's 11:06, so I won't say a word other than well done, Councillor McCormick.
Any other councillors wish
Excellent
to?
motion.
Yes, I think it's a great motion. I wholeheartedly support it. I think because of rate capping, we haven't really been increasing the amount of grants that we give to each of the neighbourhood houses. They do amazing work. A lot of it's done on you know, they're run on a smell of an oily rag, and there's a lot of volunteer hours that go into fundraising for them as well, and sometimes they're quite disheartened because they put time into applying for grant opportunities, whether it's for some training and education stuff or whatever, and they don't always get it. And that happened to one of ours in our ward, and it's, yeah, they desperately need some more funding. And I think part of the letter should actually state the disadvantage in Frankston and things like domestic violence and all the rest, and why neighbourhood houses are so important, because for places like Orwell Street, it's a lot of people's second home, people with disabilities and all the rest, and really important that we do this.
Thank you very much. Any other councillors? If not, Councillor McCormick, do you want to sum up? Okay, I'll put it to the vote. All in favour? Motion carried unanimously.
Mr Mayor, can I move we go into closed council?
Let's move Councillor Cunha, seconded Councillor Mayer. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Can I ask the gallery to please vacate? Can I get an officer to make the door secure?